This episode of News Dump is brought to you by Upstart.
Okay, as promised, we are going to start off today's episode by not talking about COVID-19.
The Roni.
Because we're well aware that all of us would like to take a break and just not think about it for a few minutes. Have no fear, though. We certainly have lots of pandemic-related stories thrown in as well at the end because, well, you know. All right, here we go. Not talking about the virus. Okay, as you may or may not know, one of the worst films of all time, Cats, was recently released on VOD ahead of its physical release in April. And for reasons we can only assume amount to self-torture, people online decided to organize a nationwide social media watch-along where they could discuss the film as it played out by utilizing the hashtag #JellicleChat.
Yeah, so it was mostly fun and games and a good way to keep your mind off of other things for a while. People mocked the film for being terrible, of course, and provided minute-by-minute takedowns and reactions of the film as it played out in their homes. As the discussion around Cats Online went viral, though, a tweet from a writer-director named Ben Meckler would lead to a reveal about the film that we're not sure anyone could have seen coming.
No, we expected almost everything from this film, but not this. The tweet sent out by Meckler read, "I desperately need a tell-all book about the making of Cats. It could really help me through this." And the reply heard round the world came from a Twitter user named Jack Waz, who said the following in response to the previous tweet. Quote, "A VFX producer friend of a friend was hired in November to finish some of the 400 effects shots in Cats movie. His entire job was to remove CGI buttholes that had been inserted a few months before, which means that somewhere out there exists a butthole cut of Cats."
All right.
So this one tweet sparked absolute chaos within the entertainment industry. Could such a cut actually exist?
Release the butthole cut.
And if so, could this be far more important than the Snyder cut of Justice League?
I think so.
Well, yeah, it would definitely be more important than the Snyder cut. But in the days since an unverified butthole cuts of Cats was announced, its existence has so far remained nothing more than an urban legend.
I want to believe. But yeah, this not knowing, it hasn't stopped filmmakers, actors, writers, and fans alike from spamming social media sites with demands that Universal Pictures release the butthole cut. So does such a cut of the film actually exist? Well, it's looking like maybe.
Maybe.
I mean, yeah, you thought we were going to say no, right? That's ridiculous. Why would there be buttholes on the cats? But it turns out that, well, it's not necessarily the case that a true butthole cut of Cats exists. There is a little bit of a middle ground here.
Yeah.
So after 2 full days of the internet, journalists, and people within the industry scrambling to prove the validity of the accusation and procure a copy of this butthole cut, some answers have been found.
Yes.
Research into the rumor done by Vanity Fair seemed to confirm that one such cut exists and has been spoken about within the industry since at least as far back as January. But their own different friend of a friend source denied their request to go on record about the whole thing. So this is obviously very serious business. It runs deep.
Yeah,
People's reputations are on the line here.
They verified from a separate source that wasn't the one that contacted Ben Meckler, apparently, that this has at least been talked about for months now.
Yeah, that butthole cut, it's in the Raiders of the Lost Ark warehouse. It's under the control of top men.
But listen, it's not all dead ends. Let's go back to where this all started, Ben Meckler. Since his tweet was the one that resulted in the reply that spawned the whole butthole cut conspiracy, he kind of got obsessed with finding out the truth about this. And he was willing to open up personal lines of communication to anyone who might have more info. He did actually finally get a response from someone who wasn't just a friend of a friend, but someone who actually worked on the visual effects for the film. True first-hand knowledge. Here's what they said about it while still opting to remain anonymous.
There were never shots of cats with buttholes, or at least by design. None that I saw anyway. However, there were a dozen or so shots where the skin and fur sim was groomed or just folded in a way that really, really looked like very furry lady genitals and buttholes by accident. The task, as typical with heavy CG shows, fell on 2D to paint out the offending articles where it was brought up and spotted. Daily reviews were constant awkward discussions of people plucking up the courage to point things like this out. Does that look like a fanny to you?
Those must have been real fun meetings. Especially having watched this and everyone in the room knowing that this is going to land with a thud and be considered one of the worst movies of all time. But we have to make sure those fannies and those buttholes, at the very least, we got to get rid of those.
You know, it is weird. Cats comes out and then,
all this happens?
3 weeks later, there's a new virus. spreading throughout the world.
Now, obviously, that whole anonymous source, but still a direct source, that kind of explains everything. And we're inclined to believe this anonymous source because it really does seem like the most reasonable explanation possible. Still, though, people were obviously upset that a full butthole-filled version of Cats probably doesn't exist. But we'll let Ben Meckler have the final word on this since he started it all anyway. Quote, I don't know why some of you are reacting to this with disappointment when to me the takeaway is, quote, there were also cat pussies. Seems like a bonus.
X-rated cats. Yes, I know you weirdos want it.
We're all waiting to see if the physical release will include the fanny butthole cut.
Yeah.
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 Anyways, now this. Oh, sorry. We're just going through some Last Week Tonight withdrawals. Their show has been taken off the air for the foreseeable future. Although it was good without the audience there.
Uh-huh.
I found it to be
I thought it was better, honestly. I thought it was a lot more smooth.
Yeah. I mean, plus it's a great segue, which is something we're usually pretty terrible at. So without further ado, terrible. Anyway, speaking of terrible movies, the Razzie Awards sort of happened recently, though they didn't have an actual ceremony because, we're not going to say it, but So let's just give you a rundown of this year's winners, aka this year's losers. And in case for some reason you are unaware, the Razzies are like the Tuggies, but for movies. And they were around way before the Tuggies. Mm-hmm. They celebrate the worst that the industry has to offer. So here you go. Here's the winners from this year's Golden Raspberry Awards.
Rambo Last Blood took home 2 Razzies, one for Worst Reckless Disregard for Human Life and Public Property, as well as Worst Remake, Ripoff, or Sequel.
Worst Actress went to Hilary Duff in a movie we never even heard of. It was called The Haunting of Sharon Tate.
What?
And then John Travolta took home the prize for Worst Actor for his roles in both The Fanatic and Trading Paint.
Razzie Redemption Award was presented to Eddie Murphy, who has had a ton of absolutely terrible movie appearances over the past 2 decades, but received the Redeemer Award for his work in Dolomite Is My Name.
Yeah, it's very good.
Good.
For him, yeah. It should come as no surprise that literally every other category was awarded to Cats this year. Yes, Cats nearly swept the Razzies this year, taking home the win in the following categories. Worst on-screen combo for any 2 half-feline, half-human hairballs. Worst screenplay. Worst director, Tom Hooper. Worst supporting actress, Rebel Wilson. Worst supporting actor, James Corden. And of course, worst picture of the year. So, congrats, Cats, for this monumental achievement in appalling entertainment. Now release the butthole cut.
Hey, release the butthole cut.
Hashtag release the butthole cut. I'm going to take out a billboard in Times Square. Nobody's going to be able to see it because no one's out right now, but that means it'll be cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you're thinking like a businessman.
Yes.
Okay, have no fear. We still have to get to Marvel's cringy new woke superheroes and some seemingly mandatory at this point coronavirus stuff. But first, let's take a second to thank today's sponsor, Upstart. As most of you have found out the hard way, getting into debt is easy. Getting out is hard, especially if your credit score isn't great. Thankfully, now there's Upstart.com, the revolutionary lending platform that knows you're more than just your credit score and offers smarter interest rates to help you pay off high-interest credit card debt. We've both been there. Credit card interest rates are terrible, and transferring your debt to a loan with a much better interest rate means getting out of debt a whole lot faster.
Upstart goes beyond the traditional credit score when assessing your credit worthiness. They actually reward you based on your education and job history in the form of a smarter rate. Upstart believes you're more than just your credit score. They make it fast, simple, and easy to check your rate. And since it's just a soft pull, it won't affect your credit score. The hard pull does happen if you accept your rate.
And the best part is once the loan is approved and accepted, most people get their funds the very next business day. Over 400,000 people have used Upstart to pay off credit cards or meet their financial goals. Free yourself from the burden of high-interest credit card debt by consolidating everything into one monthly payment with Upstart. See why Upstart is top-ranked in their category with a 4.9 out of 5 rating on Trustpilot, and hurry to upstart.com/newsdump to find out how low your Upstart rate is. Checking your rate only takes a few minutes. That is upstart.com/newsdump.
Or click the link in the description below. Thank you for sponsoring the episode. And okay, all right. Oh God, here we go. Listen, we agree with you. Marvel's latest generation of new warriors is just pure cringe. And it couldn't have dropped at a worse time because the last thing the world needs right at this moment is woke superheroes. There's probably a time and a place and maybe even a market for this.
I don't know. All the people that I think they thought were the target audience for this seem really...
yeah, I don't think anyone likes this.
They seem the most offended at all on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, I don't think this is for anyone, really.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. But dropping it right now, it's not doing anyone, especially Marvel, any favors. And most of all, the people behind this. I can't imagine the meetings that happened to create this. Listen, right now we need actual superheroes like doctors, volunteers, workers sacrificing their health and well-being to provide vital supplies to people.
And influencers.
And content creators, of course. So listen, let's just get through this and get it over with. This is going to be like pulling a Band-Aid reading this. It is cringy as fuck.
So Marvel recently announced, the Marvel Comics, they
Yeah.
recently announced these new warriors alongside some mock-ups of how they look and a description of each one. Starting with, and yes, these are the real character names and descriptions, by the way.
Yeah.
Starting with Screen Time, a meme-obsessed super teen whose brain became connected to the internet after becoming exposed to his grandfather's experimental internet gas.
Gross.
Now he can see augmented reality and real-time maps and can instantly Google any fact. Does this make him effectively a genius? He sure acts like it does.
Oh, Grandpa's old internet gas.
That description just gave me the coronavirus.
Yeah, seriously.
I guess I'll die now.
In my brain, when I think of Grandpa's old internet gas, I can just imagine a person, a 75-year-old man browsing 4chan and farting in his hospital
A
bed.
75-year-old man just tearing his asshole up with two hands.
He can't control his bowels because he's shoved so many Sharpies up his butt to post them on 4chan that now gas just leaks from his asshole, thus creating the internet gas that Screen Time has huffed and turned into a superhero with. Next up, the dynamic duo, Snowflake and Safe Space.
Fuck you. Fuck you!
They're described as psychic twins. All twins are psychic, but we're psychicer. Snowflake, a cryokinetic, can materialize snowflake-shaped shuriken projectiles for throwing. Safe Space can materialize pink force fields, but he can't inhabit them himself. The reflex only works if he's protecting others. They're hyper-aware of modern culture and optics, and they see their superheroics as, quote, a post-ironic meditation on using violence to combat bullying. They're probably streaming this. And yes, all of these characters look like Twitch streamers. It hurts me inside and out to read these. So.
After those two comes B negative. A teen, living vampire, exposed to Michael Morbius's blood as a child in a rogue but life-saving medical procedure. He still ages like a regular kid, but has all the abilities of Morbius. He's also obsessed with all the music and attitude of a classic long past decades like the 90s and the 2000s. The world is a vampire, and so am I. Jesus fucking Christ.
Do you get the play on words?
Yeah.
The world is a vampire. Dun, 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 dun. Because he likes the vintage music of the 90s, you see.
Okay.
All right, last but certainly not least is Trailblazer, a regular kid scooped up into the world of teenage superheroing. Her magic backpack is actually a pocket dimension with seemingly infinite space, from which she can pull out useful or random objects, most likely sporks to poke badgers with. It's not always under her control, though. She claims to get her power from God, but not the God you're thinking of. Honestly, we're just... Oh, that's what I wrote. We're just speechless. So let's get into something less cringy, the coronavirus.
So, okay. See, we provided you with a lot of stories there that weren't COVID-19 related. Now we can all settle down for yet another update. We got some... It's not good news, I'm sorry. As you're probably well aware by now, Disney made it official by announcing that Marvel's Black Widow has officially been postponed.
Yeah.
We all saw that coming, and as far as we've seen, at least by when we filmed this video, there was no new release date information available, nor were there any indication that the film would be coming straight to Disney Plus as opposed to a straight theatrical release.
Yeah, it's just kind of in the air. But even if they'd kept the film on track for release, it wouldn't have mattered much at all because... Yeah, it was also made official this week that all theater chains are finally closing down to just completely after trying to stagger their seating sections. It was a nice try.
Putting trash bags over seats.
Yeah,
like,
it was a nice try on their part,
Yeah.
but they're now just officially closing down so they can adhere to the guidelines passed down from state and local governments. AMC, Regal, Alamo, Cinemark, and probably a bunch of chains that neither we nor you have ever heard about. They're all shutting their doors for the foreseeable future starting on different dates. Check your local listings. Yeah, I wouldn't suggest even going out to a theater if they were still open.
No.
But I know for sure AMC closes on Tuesday. They're trying to get one last weekend of Bloodshot in.
One last ride.
Yeah.
Bloodshot is coming straight to
Yeah.
VOD as well.
Bloodshot's coming to VOD, and Birds of Prey is releasing early. It's releasing next week.
I want to see that. That's cool.
Hey, listen, I actually like
This is a great time for me, who like I would go to the movie theater more. I just don't.
Yeah.
There's always movies I want to see, but I'm like, I gotta go.
And then you forget by the time they actually come out.
I gotta park somewhere. I gotta buy my tickets far enough in advance that I can get the seats that I want. Now I can just pay $20 and watch that shit on my couch and pause anytime I need to take a piss or refill my drink or any of the important things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
One good thing though, the business is back to booming for drive-ins. I know like 90% of people that were watching this probably don't live near a drive-in, but we have like 5 still here in the LA area.
We do?
Yeah, and they
They all got like turned into swap meets.
They're swap meets like on Sunday afternoons and Saturday afternoons, but then they go back to being drive-ins. There's one about 10 miles east from here that is continuing their release schedule. They have 4 different screens.
Okay.
And you just turn to a certain radio station in your car and it plays through your car speakers. We're going back to drive-ins, baby, and it is the best part of this coronavirus outbreak.
All right.
So, hey, if you don't have one in your town, you could be the true capitalist that comes and saves everyone by buying one of those big blow-up screens.
Yeah.
There you go.
Recession-proof.
Yes.
ESPN, who has no content right now, because all the sports are gone.
Yeah, even their commentators are like, I don't know what I'm supposed to talk about.
They're finding ways to keep antsy sports fans happy by expanding their coverage of lesser-known sports that don't involve lots of people standing too close to each other, as they are bringing back ESPN 8, The Ocho. In a press release from the Sports Network, they said the following. No, it's not the 8th of August, or the 8th of anything, or even August at all. That's the magic of ESPN 8, The Ocho.
It's back, baby.
There's always a place for a full 24 hours of seldom-seen sports. So Sunday, March 22nd on ESPN 2 will be just that, a full day of exciting content from Ocho stunts past.
This will be the 4th edition of ESPN 8 The Ocho since the initiative began in the summer of 2017, inspired by the 2004 hit movie Dodgeball, a true underdog story, featuring Vince Vaughn, Christine Taylor, and Ben Stiller. The lineup includes the following. Stupid Robot Fighting League, created in New Zealand by John Espin. Yes, that's actually his real name. Stupid Robot Fighting is a rather unique form of fighting that pits 2 life-sized hanging puppets controlled by an operator sitting behind each stupid robot.
Okay. 2019 Gels Marble Runs. Oh, these are great. These are races in which both participants and spectators are marbles.
Yes, the crowd is marbles.
Yeah.
It's just like there's a game, Marbles on Stream, that's great. Yeah. So this is the real version of that. Then there's Cherry Pit Spitting. The 46th annual Cherry Pit Spitting competition is held each year in Eau Claire, Michigan, with one goal for competitors, to spit the farthest cherry pit.
I don't think we should be encouraging spitting right now.
Yeah.
This is a bit ill-advised.
Well, it's the Ocho. They don't follow the rules.
No.
They make their own.
Sign spinning. The 12th annual World Sign Spinning Championship, held in Las Vegas, brought together AA Aero sign spinners from more than 50 cities and a dozen countries to assess style, execution, and technical sign spinning ability.
Then there's the 2007 World Sports Stacking Championships. Sports stacking can be an individual or team sport where participants stack specially designed cups in predetermined sequences as fast as possible.
Oh, I remember when that was cool for like 6 months.
Yeah, I learned about it.
15 years
There was
ago.
a show on Nickelodeon a long time ago called Figure It Out, and it was, people had talents or special abilities, and one of the episodes had a pro stacker on it.
Whoa, he turned that whole castle made of cups into one cup. There's the 2019 Death Diving World Championship. This is an amateur diving sport performed from a 10-meter high platform with separate competitions for classic and freestyle.
Yeah, there's a bunch more. There's putt-putt golf competitions and stuff like that. There's a whole schedule. ESPN
I don't know
on Sunday
why,
is really wild.
NBA season, it's over. Just start simulating games in 2K.
Well,
that's a golden opportunity.
That's what I was saying on the stream the other day, but I don't know if they allow that anymore in the games, because you used to be able to just set it as CPU versus CPU, and it would be just fine. And I agree, this should...
I feel like EA could flip a switch and give them...
Flip the switch, EA.
Yeah.
Now, if sports aren't your thing and you'd just rather watch some movies or a series along with your friends without leaving the bunker, a new app called Netflix Party has blown up over the past week, and it allows you to just sync up your Netflix streams with your friends, and it has an integrated chat room so you can talk about whatever you're watching with whoever you send an invite to. It's done through a downloadable Chrome extension, and yes, we know there have been a few of these types of apps that have come and gone over the years, but this is the one that works right now.
Yeah.
Because very quickly, Netflix can put the screws to a lot of these companies.
Yeah.
There was one called Rabbit or something that changed afterwards. But yes, this one works now, at least currently. Plus, if you have Discord or you just want to sit on an extended phone call, it works as an easy way to just sync the shows while you hang out with your friends virtually over the phone or on video chat. So
Yeah.
there you go.
And, God damn it. So...
Should probably talk about Gal Gadot's video.
So, like, this is a weird time. And
Yeah.
it's affecting
We're dealing with it.
It's affecting everyone, whether they're rich or poor, famous or non-famous. And, some celebrities whose, their hearts seem to have been in the right places, but, being incredibly rich and successful, it does make you a bit out of touch. So basically, Gal Gadot and a bunch of her celebrity friends.
There's like Will Ferrell, Sarah Silverman, Sia,
Jimmy Fallon.
Was Seth Rogen in it?
I don't know.
A lot of famous people. A lot of
famous faces sitting in their giant backyards in the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah.
They all took turns singing
Imagine by John Lennon.
Yeah, stanzas from Imagine by John Lennon. Some of them okay, some of them quite poorly. And they released that into the world, I guess,
I think it was like on Instagram or something?
To make everyone, to cheer people up.
Inspire hope?
I don't know. Just fucking donate money, you guys. Like,
yeah.
I know, like, your accounts all got, like, wiped this past week. All of our accounts did.
Yeah.
The stocks, they're real bad.
Bad stonks.
But, this isn't helping anyone. This is the worst thing I've ever seen.
When I saw it, I just said, like, when this video goes up...
It's way too early in the pandemic for this kind of shit.
When this video goes up, I'll probably put it up Friday morning. I'll probably edit it tonight, put it up Friday morning. But as of Friday, it will have been...
1 week.
1 week.
One
week. And if this is how people are reacting after less than 1 week in self-isolation, we are doomed.
Yeah, we're looking at like 4 to 6 weeks minimum.
Bare minimum.
But like realistically...
Probably 4 months.
Probably 4 months.
Yeah.
And we're like 5 days into this fucking thing.
And people are already making like the shit that you would see at the beginning of an absolute disaster zombie movie. Like, this is the last thing sent out through the airwaves before... ambulances started crashing into each other and zombies started roaming.
This is what happens, though, when you shut down all of the active, like, film and TV sets in Hollywood. These people they need to perform. If you don't give them a script to perform, they start filming themselves doing the cringiest shit imaginable.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's becoming very clear, who can handle it and who can't, and who can do this the right way and who can't. Because... typically, so far, musicians have handled it well. They do live performances on there. Yeah. It's not as if actors can just, like, read Shakespeare, although that might be a cool idea. Josh Gad has been reading children's books to kids online
nightly.
Nice. His was a little bit weird where he taught him it was okay to cry today, but
that was a bit odd. A little bit cringy as well.
The guitarist from Dragon Force does a daily, guitar instruction class on Twitch now. People are coping. Actors, not so much.
Yeah, it's... I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just not what anyone asks for. It's not what anyone wants. I was baffled watching this. I was like,
what? No, it felt apocalyptic.
Yeah. And I'm like looking at this, there's like fucking 25 people in it. I'm like, you could each throw down like $10,000 and buy like masks for like every hospital in Los Angeles.
And wouldn't even notice the money being gone.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of that, speaking of just plain virtue signaling, this fucking Gamers for COVID-19 thing, where I went to the site, I was like, oh, look at all these huge, gigantic gamers, Twitch streamers who have just boatloads of money, are committing to staying inside, and that's it.
Yeah. You know how we're all like, there's a pandemic and everyone's being told to stay inside? Well, we're going to do the same thing we do every fucking day anyway, since we all became streamers. Yeah. And we're going to game indoors.
Yeah.
So...
are you a bad enough dude to take the pledge to stay inside, which is what CDC, national, local, and state governments are actually telling you to do? Are you a bad enough gamer to do that? By the way, this site, all it has is a place to put your name in and hit pledge. And when you do that, it says, thanks, Ninja, for taking the pledge. Now tell other people to take the pledge. There's nothing there.
That's it? There's no
donation button to any causes, Meals on Wheels, no Red Cross, anything like that. There's no links to anything to donate. And all these huge gamers who are like, yeah, I did it. I took the pledge. without fucking donating anything, you're just patting yourself on the back for doing absolutely
Yeah,
nothing.
you should have to at least pour a bucket of ice on yourself or something. Come on.
Here's the thing, and it's like, oh, well, I'm assuming what the excuse would be, oh, we're spreading awareness. Hey, guess what? It's the biggest thing on earth.
Yeah, I don't think a whole lot of people are unaware.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a concern.
We're signing a pledge.
We're
going to break down the gates of that Big Brother house and tell them what's going on.
Listen, guys, I don't know about everyone else, but me personally,
I'm a gamer.
I think this COVID-19 is pretty bad. And I mean, I don't care what you say.
Yeah.
Not a fan of it. So
I hope I inspired you today.
Bring on the downvotes, I guess.
Fucking Christ. All right. Well, that's it for us today.
IRL streamers have got to be in a tight spot right now.
Oh, because they can't go outside?
Yeah, those assholes with like the backpacks that always just like fucking go around LA, like getting the cops called on them and shit.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, they're probably still out doing that.
Yeah, probably.
They're down at spring break at Clearwater.
Yeah.
By the way, Florida, before we go, Florida did finally announce that they're closing the beaches.
Oh, only like a week late.
No, but after the weekend.
Jesus Christ.
Anyways, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our other videos over here. We'll see you very soon for a new episode of Weekly Weird News. Stay strong out there. We'll keep on keeping on here. We'll be making videos for you for the, we're doing it anyway, so we will keep you entertained as best as we can to the best of our
here
ability.
on the front lines of the,
the war against
COVID-19, we will continue in the face of this pandemic to post.
Yeah.
So
they said it couldn't be done. Well, damn it.
It's a thankless job.
Yeah.
But we're just going to keep doing it.
I'm going to make sure to wear, I'm going to start carrying the YouTube play button around so that people in airports thank me for my service.
Come through.
Wait, you get the veterans discount?
Yeah.
After this, we better get a veterans discount.
Sir, would you like to come up to the Sky Lounge?
Thank you.
The
Bob Hope USO.
The Bob Hope.
Invite us to the USO.
Hey, where did
cowards.
you guys serve? Where are you?
Internet during COVID-19.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, videos are over here now, finally. Sorry, we ranted a bit at the end. Here's the videos. Sorry. We'll see you very soon for Weekly Weird News. Stay safe. Bye. We love you.
Bye.
Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This is going to be my new Marvel video. Marvel just made a bunch of big announcements about what's going on with their Marvel Phase 4 schedule, the movies because of the virus during 2020. Things are being canceled, things are being delayed. So we'll break everything down. Because of what's going on, we're doing an Amazon giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave all your theories about Marvel Phase 4 on the video. I'll just break this down top 5 WTF style, starting with number 5. So recently, a lot of studios have started canceling their movie releases during March and April. RIP New Mutants for the 4th time. Press F in the chat for that movie. But then what changed just a couple days ago, in the United States at least, and a few other major countries, is that virtually all movie theater chains were ordered to shut down for a much longer period of time, between 8 weeks and a couple months. It's different for each major theater chain. But it almost makes it impossible to actually physically go out and see a movie for a couple months. So after that escalated, Marvel preemptively canceled the Black Widow movie premiere, like we all kind of thought that they might. That was originally happening at the beginning of May. It seemed like it might be safe since it was so far out, but the theater shutdown will extend beyond that, so there's no point in them trying to release Black Widow until all the theaters are back to normal later this year, at least in the United States. So number 4 WTF, when Marvel took Black Widow off the schedule, it did not give it a new release date. So it's literally just sitting on a shelf on a giant hard drive somewhere in Kevin Feige's office. Right now, best case scenario is Marvel releases it between the end of May, just pushes it a couple weeks, and early July. Originally, Marvel was going to release Guardians of the Galaxy 3 July 31st of this year. When they postponed that, they didn't replace it with anything. There's no Disney movie that's now coming out at the end of July, so it wouldn't be weird for them to just push Black Widow to July if they wanted to. And as for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, right now it looks like it's coming out sometime during 2022 based on James Gunn's production schedule. He said that he's going to finish doing the Suicide Squad reboot movie, then he's going to start working on Guardians 3. Vin Diesel was even nice enough to drop that the Guardians will definitely cross over with Thor 4 Love and Thunder, and Thor will also show up during Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Even though anybody who saw the end of Avengers Endgame just kind of expected that they would somehow follow up on this moment of Thor with the Guardians as Guardians of the Galaxy together again, we just didn't know quite how that was going to play out and what it would look like. Now it sounds like the Guardians will just cameo during Thor 4, and Thor will just cameo during Guardians 3, but they're not going to call Guardians 3 as Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 3 WTF. When they made the Black Widow announcement, Marvel also answered a bunch of questions about the rest of the Marvel Phase 4 timeline on all the other movies, the Disney Plus series, because there's a lot of stuff coming out later this year. Everyone wondering if they postpone Black Widow, is that going to mess up the flow of all the Marvel Phase 4 storytelling and everything that's coming the next couple of years? All the Disney Plus series, all the Marvel movies are supposed to be connected, so there's a logic to when they're releasing things and why they're coming in a certain order. The reason why Black Widow is coming now, right after Avengers Endgame, is because we literally just saw her die during Avengers Endgame, so one, you kind of want to get that story out before you wait too long. They're trying to explain why she sacrificed herself over Hawkeye on Vormir and push the Marvel Phase 4 story forward by teasing upcoming Thunderbolt Ross Super Soldier Weapons Plus program in the Thunderbolts. Yes, it would have made more sense to release her movie during Marvel Phase 3 or even back during Marvel Phase 2. I'm sure a lot of people's reviews when the movie actually does come out will reference that fact. Like, this feels like a Marvel Phase 3 movie, even though they're trying to release it during Marvel Phase 4. So I do think a lot of the stuff that they added to the Black Widow movie that connects it to stuff that happens after Avengers Endgame, after her death, is just in service of trying to make that more relevant to Marvel Phase 4. Because the movie takes place between Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War, so I think a lot of the marketing is actually just dealing with the confusion that people are having over where this movie fits and what's going on with Black Widow during it. Thankfully, Marvel just came out and said that any Black Widow delays won't affect the rest of the Marvel Phase 4 release schedule and storytelling. So number 2 WTF, what's going on with Disney's plans to release stuff on Disney Plus and VOD instead of releasing it in theaters? All the major studios have started doing this with some of their movies that are coming out right now, like Vin Diesel's Bloodshot, another Marvel actor doing another movie at Sony. It just hit theaters a week ago, but Sony is releasing it on VOD next week. Universal did the same thing with some of their big movies that are coming out right now. But here's the thing, none of the studios have done this yet with a major tentpole movie. Fast and Furious 9, also Vin Diesel movie, is a good example. Universal just pushed that a full year to April of next year instead of trying to release it on VOD with the other Universal movies that it's releasing right now on VOD. So everyone's really just doing it with the smaller budget movies and the movies that it didn't think were going to earn a lot of money at the box office. So right now, it is very possible that Marvel could release New Mutants on VOD. The budget for that was way under $100 million. It's easier for Marvel to earn most of the money back on that because technically they're saddled with all those Fox films when Disney bought Fox. The reason why they probably won't release Black Widow early on VOD or on Disney Plus is because the budget was way over $150 million, probably closer to $175 million, and that doesn't include the marketing costs. The real reason why studios don't want to release their giant tentpole films on VOD right now is because movies typically have 6 different times that they earn money in the life cycle of the movie. There's the theatrical release, which for Black Widow could earn between $700 million and $1 billion. Then they release it on VOD and home video, another round of profits, another giant pile of cash. Then they license the movie to cable channels like HBO, they make another dump truck of cash, then they release the movie on streaming platforms like Netflix, obviously Disney Plus, and earn even more money yet again. If they skip all those steps and go straight to streaming, they miss out on almost $1 billion of profit on the Black Widow movie. The reason why they might be okay doing that with New Mutants is just because there's no way that movie was ever going to earn $1 billion at the box office. So number 1 WTF, this is what's happening with the rest of the Marvel Phase 4 schedule right now. Even though everything is kind of on a break just for the next couple of weeks, bare minimum, could be longer than that, but they're just on a hiatus. Marvel said Falcon and Winter Soldier is still going to premiere in August and continue the Weapons Plus program Super Soldier Thunderbolt story. Then Marvel said it's still releasing the Eternals movie in November that explains the ancient origins of the MCU, helps set up modern-day mutants and X-Men characters. I'll do separate videos about the Eternals. We're supposed to get a trailer for that in May, but because of the delays, they might push that just a little bit. In December, they released the WandaVision episodes, also explaining Scarlet Witch's reality warping, chaos magic powers, the multiverse, and teasing more mutants in the MCU through her twin children with Vision. Marvel's Shang-Chi movie did go on break for a couple weeks, but it's still being released in February 2021. Marvel hasn't said a lot about how that deepens the Avengers-level storytelling, but they're playing a lot on the Iron Man Easter eggs from the 10 Rings in Iron Man 3 and the Mandarin. Hopefully they'll bring Trevor back for a cameo somehow. They're billing the movie kind of like Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon if it were made inside the MCU with Marvel characters. The Loki series is still supposed to come out around late March sometime next year. It's only 6 episodes, it'll introduce more multiverse-level villains. Then right after that is Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness, which goes full-blown multiverse, teasing alternate versions of MCU characters from other realities. Fun fact too, Kevin Smith also said on his podcast recently that Marcus and McFeely, the writers of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, literally showed him footage on their phones of the Avengers Infinity War deleted scene of Doctor Strange becoming the Iron Mage with Benedict Cumberbatch literally wearing a real physical Iron Man suit that they built for him for the movie that looked just like this. I did a whole video about that deleted scene a couple weeks ago, so we'll add a link to it at the end of this. Hopefully they'll bring that deleted scene back around and incorporate it into Doctor Strange 2 somehow. Spider-Man 3 is supposed to come out July 2021. Tom Holland said that they're still starting to film that in July of this year. Then they do Thor 4, Love and Thunder, November 2021, and Hawkeye is supposed to come out sometime around then, either before or after Thor 4. They haven't said which. So if you have any big questions about what's going on right now with all the Marvel movies and the Disney Plus series, just write them below in the comments and I'll just try to keep up with everything as Marvel continues to make big announcements about what's going on. I'm working on a new Fantastic Four video, so that should post sometime tomorrow. As long as you have alerts enabled for my channel, you should see that when I post it.
Essentially orders. Now, we have a group of recommendations and guidelines that are applicable to the entire country. You know them. We've been over them. Yet there are places, regions, states, cities in this country that are being stressed much, much more than the country as a whole. Clearly, one of them was Washington. Another one was California. Governor Newsom made some very important, difficult decisions. Today, Governor Cuomo did the same thing. And I want to say I strongly support what he's doing. And one thing, as a New Yorker myself, for those of you who haven't figured out from my accent that I'm from New York, as a New Yorker, I know what New Yorkers can do. We're tough. I was in New York City on September 11th, 2001. And I know what the New Yorkers can do. So please, cooperate with your governor, cooperate with your mayor. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. President. The White House Coronavirus Task Force met this morning. We continue at the President's direction to bring the full resources, not just of the federal government, but in full partnership with our state governments, businesses around America, and a partnership with the American people to respond to the threat of the coronavirus. And I know I can speak on behalf of the President with confidence when I say how inspired we are by the way the American people and American businesses are coming together to help defeat this virus in our country. Millions of Americans are putting into practice the President's 15-day guidelines, and we encourage everyone, even those that are not in areas with significant outbreak, to review these guidelines over the next week and more and put them into practice, and you'll continue to do your part. Later today, we'll be talking with manufacturers around the country, and the President and I continue to be inspired by the way American industry is stepping forward. We have businesses around the country that are literally volunteering to retrofit plants to help us meet the needs of our healthcare workers and our healthcare system in confronting the coronavirus. As the President mentioned yesterday, following his decision to put FEMA in the lead, the emergency declaration, we actually met with all the nation's governors from the FEMA National Response Coordination Center. The President and I, our entire team at the federal level, couldn't be more grateful for the efforts of all of our governors in implementing the guidance that is being issued, not only from our task force, but also in taking strong measures in their own communities to protect their citizens. We want to urge every American to heed your local authorities, listen to their guidance, and also do your part to slow the spread. We reiterated to all of the governors that the President, by putting FEMA in the lead, will continue to implement a plan that is locally executed, state managed, and federally supported that puts the health of America first. We have received a report today, as the President mentioned, on our legislative team on Capitol Hill. We're working with Republicans and Democrats at this very hour to pass an economic recovery package that the President described, and we hope to see the Congress act on that early next week. On the subject of supplies, we continue to make steady progress on testing. Thanks to the President's involvement of commercial labs, the public and private partnership, more and more Americans are being tested every single day. And tomorrow, Admiral Gua and FEMA will update the American public on the status of testing and our support of state-based testing efforts that are literally expanding by the hour. On the subject of medical supplies, we continue at the President's direction to pursue every means to expand the supply of personal protective equipment for the extraordinary and courageous healthcare workers that are ministering to the needs of people impacted by the coronavirus. We have a policy of procuring, allocating, as well as conserving the resources that we have in our system. And now that the President worked with the Congress to make industrial masks fully available for hospitals to be able to purchase, to be able to use as protective equipment, we're more encouraged than ever about the availability of those important N95 masks to our healthcare facilities. And over this weekend, we'll be announcing a major procurement from the federal government of N95 masks as well. We're also encouraged that we're finding new alternatives to increase the supply of ventilators. We've mentioned that we have a federal stockpile, some 20,000 ventilators on standby, but that doesn't count the tens of thousands of ventilators that are in our healthcare system around the country. But the President has challenged us to work to free up other ventilators from other sources around the country. And there are two different ways that we're doing that. Number one, in our recent discussion with anesthesiologists, we've literally identified tens of thousands of existing ventilators that can be retrofitted and converted to be ventilators for people struggling with the coronavirus. But also, on the President's behalf, on behalf of all of our task force, we want to continue to urge every American and every American hospital and healthcare facility to postpone any elective medical procedures. This will free up bed space, free up hospital capacity for people that are struggling with the coronavirus, and it'll also free up equipment that our healthcare workers need. It is inspiring that we continue to receive reports that businesses around America are donating N95 masks to their local hospitals. Businesses large and small are donating hundreds, in some cases millions of N95 masks. And I know how grateful the President is, and we all are. And let me close by saying, as all of our experts have said many times, while the threat of serious illness to the average American from the coronavirus remains low, every American can do your part to reduce the burden on your health, on your family, the burden on our healthcare system, and especially the threat to the most vulnerable among us by putting into practice the President's 15 days to slow the spread. And as the President said at the outset of his remarks, I know that millions of Americans are doing that just now, and the greatness of the American character is shining forth.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
You had a call with Senator Schumer. He says you've now agreed to invoke the Defense Production Act to actually make those medical supplies that hospitals say are in severe shortage. So two questions. Is that what you're doing now?
It is. I did it yesterday. We invoked it, I think, the day before. We signed it the evening of the day before and invoked it yesterday. We have a lot of people working very hard to do ventilators and various other things, yes.
So you're using it now to tell businesses they need to make ventilators, masks, respirators?
For certain things that we need,
Okay.
including including some of the very important emergency. I would say ventilators, probably more masks to a large extent. We have millions of masks which are coming and which will be distributed to the states. The states are having a hard time getting them, so we're using the Act. The Act is very good for things like this. We have millions of masks that we've ordered. They will be here soon. We're having them shipped directly to states.
So you said you were signing this but not invoking it. This is what you said yesterday, and that you would only do so in a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So are we now at a worst case scenario?
We need, no, it's no different other than we need certain equipment that the states are unable to get by themselves. So we're invoking it to use the powers of the federal government to help the states get things that they need, like the masks, like the ventilators. Yeah, Steve?
Governor Cuomo has done in New York, is there any more consideration to a national lockdown to keep people in their homes?
I don't think so. Essentially, you've done that in California, you've done that in New York. Those are really two hotbeds. Those are probably the two hottest of them all in terms of hotspots. I don't think so, because you go out to the Midwest, you go out to other locations, and they're watching it on television, but they don't have the same problems. They don't have, by any means, the same problem. New York, California, Miami, the governor's doing an excellent job. Governor DeSantis in Florida. We have some pretty hot spots in Florida, too. But we're and the state of Washington, of course. But that was largely, if you look at it, it was one nursing home that had problems like you wouldn't believe. So no, we're working with the governors, and I don't think we'll ever find that necessary.
We're about a week into your 15-day guidelines. Are you happy with the progress? Would you like to see?
I am happy. I am happy with it. We'll have to see what the results are at the end of 14 days. Let's say we'll know by the 15th day to see what we do. But I'm certainly honored by the way the American people are working, because it's work. It's work not to work. This is the first time this has ever happened. And we're working out a tremendous financial package for them so they don't work. Who ever heard of this? Usually you work out a financial package to get people working. We're asking people not to work. Social distancing, a new term that's become probably the hottest term there is. So, no, I'm very honored by the way the American people are taking this, I mean, so seriously. Yes, John?
Mr. President, a question for you and a question for Dr. Fauci, if I could. There's been some concern among Democrats on Capitol Hill that the Phase 3 fiscal stimulus is weighted too much in favor of corporations and not enough in terms of individuals. What did your conversations with Senator Schumer yield on that front?
Well, I think that really all of that is being discussed right now. We talked about, as an example, buybacks, stock buybacks. I don't want to have stock buybacks. I don't want people spending. I don't want some executive saying we're going to buy 200,000 shares of stock. I want that money to be used for the workers and also for the company, to keep the company going, but not for buybacks. I would, I mean, I haven't spoken to a lot of the Republicans or Democrats on it. We discussed it, and I don't like buybacks. I didn't like them the first time.
Are you and Senator Schumer?
So we're
on the same
discussing.
page?
We're discussing that. We're discussing many things.
Are you on the same page with Senator Schumer?
We're not so far away. I'll tell you, we're not very far away.
And to Dr. Fauci, if I could. Dr. Fauci, as was explained yesterday, there has been some promise with hydroxychloroquine, this potential therapy for people who are infected with coronavirus. Is there any evidence to suggest that, as with malaria, it might be used as a prophylaxis against COVID-19?
No, the answer is no. And the evidence that you're talking about, John, is anecdotal evidence. So as the commissioner of FDA and the president mentioned yesterday, we're trying to strike a balance between making something with a potential of an effect to the American people available at the same time that we do it under the auspices of a protocol that would give us information to determine if it's truly safe and truly effective. But the information that you're referring to specifically is anecdotal. It was not done in a controlled clinical trial, so you really can't make any definitive statement about it.
Mr. President, on that. On those therapies.
I think without seeing too much, I'm probably more of a fan of that than maybe than anybody. But I'm a big fan, and we'll see what happens. And we all understand what the doctor said is 100% correct. It's early, but I've seen things that are impressive, and we'll see. We're going to know soon. We're going to know soon, including safety. But, when you get that safety, this has been prescribed for many years for people, to combat malaria, which was a big problem, and it's very effective. It's a strong drug. So we'll see.
Fairly effective against SARS.
It was as I understand that, is that a correct statement? It was fairly effective on SARS.
John, you've got to be careful when you say fairly effective. It was never done in a clinical trial. They compared it to anything. It was given to individuals and felt that maybe it worked. So
Was there anything to compare it to?
well, that's the point. Whenever you do a clinical trial, you do standard of care versus standard of care plus the agent you're evaluating. That's the reason why we showed back in Ebola why particular interventions worked.
Sir, on that topic.
About the possible therapies, yesterday, Mr. President, you said that they were for, quote, immediate delivery. Immediate, we heard
Yeah,
from
we're
Dr.
ordering, yes, we have millions of units ordered. Bayer is one of the companies, as you know, big company, very big, very great company. Millions of units are ordered, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to be talking to the governors about it, and the FDA is working on it right now. The advantage is that it has been prescribed for a totally different problem, but it has been described for many years, and everybody knows the levels of the negatives and the positives. But I will say that I am a man that comes from a very positive school when it comes to, in particular, one of these drugs. And we'll see how it works out, Peter. I'm not saying it will, but I think that people may be surprised. By the way, that would be a game changer. But we're going to know very soon. But we have ordered millions of units. It's being ordered from Bayer, and there is a couple of companies also that do it.
For clarity, Dr. Fauci said there is no magic drug for coronavirus right now, which you would agree. I guess on this issue,
I think we only disagree a little bit.
Sorry.
I disagree. Maybe and maybe not. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. We have to see. We're going to know.
Is it possible that your impulse to put a positive spin on things may be giving Americans a false sense of hope?
No, I don't think so.
Misrepresenting the preparedness right now.
No, I don't think so. I think that I think it's got
the not yet approved drug.
Such a lovely question. Look, it may work and it may not work, and I agree with the doctor what he said. May work, may not work. I feel good about it. That's all it is, just a feeling. I'm a smart guy. I feel good about it, and we're going to see. You're going to see soon enough. And we have certainly some very big samples of people. If you look at the people, you have a lot of people that are in big trouble. And this is not a drug that, obviously, I think I can speak from a lot of experience because it's been out there for over 20 years. So it's not a drug that you have a huge amount of danger with. It's not like a brand new drug that's been just created that may have an unbelievable monumental effect, like kill you. We're going to know very soon. And I can tell you, the FDA is working very hard to get it out. Right now, in terms of malaria, if you want it, you can have a prescription. You get a prescription. And by the way, and it's very effective. It works. I have a feeling you may, and I'm not being overly optimistic or pessimistic. I sure as hell think we ought to give it a try. I mean, there's been some interesting things happened and some good, very good things. Let's see what happens. We have nothing to lose. You know the expression? What the hell do you have to lose? Okay?
So what do you say to Americans? Sir, nearly 200. I'll just follow up. Nearly 200 dead. What do you say to the Americans who are scared, though? I guess nearly 200 dead, 14,000 who are sick, millions, as you witnessed, who are scared right now. What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. Go ahead.
I
think it's a very nasty question, and I think it's a very bad signal that you're putting out to the American people. The American people are looking for answers, and they're looking for hope. And you're doing sensationalism, and the same with NBC and Comcast. I don't call it Comcast. I call it Concast. Let me just for whom you work. Let me just tell you something. That's really bad reporting. And you ought to get back to reporting instead of sensationalism. Let's see if it works. It might and it might not. I happen to feel good about it, but who knows? I've been right a lot. Let's see what happens, John.
Can I get back to the science and the logistics
You're
here?
gonna be ashamed of yourself.
The units that were ordered, are they for clinical trials or are they for distribution to the general patient population?
We are going to, as I understand it, we are going to be taking samples in New York. Governor Cuomo very much is interested in this drug, and they are going to work on it also after they get a certain approval. We're waiting for one final approval from the FDA. We'll see what happens. But we'll use it on people that are not doing great, or even at the beginning of not feeling
Sort
well.
of fall under the.
And John, what do we have to
modified
lose?
auspices. So this would sort of.
Wait, John, it's been out there for so long. We hear good things. Let's see. Maybe it works or maybe it doesn't.
I understand all that. I'm just thinking the application here. So that would be under sort of a modified compassionate access.
We're doing that, I guess, and that's what it's called, yeah. Yes.
I would like Dr. Fauci, if you don't mind, to follow up on what the president is saying. Should Americans have hope in this drug right now? And sir, I would like to follow up on Peter's question here. Could you please address Americans in this country who are scared right now? This is a very valid concern that people have.
No, there really isn't that much of a difference in many respects with what we're saying. The president feels optimistic about something, his feeling about it. What I'm saying is that it might be effective. I'm not saying that it isn't. It might be effective, but as a scientist, as we're getting it out there, we need to do it in a way as while we are making it available for people who might want the hope that it might work, you're also collecting data that will ultimately show that it is truly effective and safe under the conditions of COVID-19. So there really isn't different. It's just a question of how one feels about it.
Is there any reason to believe it's not safe?
Well, certainly as a drug, any drug, John, has some toxicities. The decades of experience that we have with this drug indicate that the toxicities are rare and they are, in many respects, reversible. What we don't know is when you put it in the context of another disease, whether it's safe. Fundamentally, I think it probably is going to be safe. But I like to prove things first. So it really is a question of not a lot of difference. It's the hope that it will work versus proving that it will work. So I don't see big differences here.
I agree.
Sir, your message to Americans who are working at home, who have their children in their homes right now, who are homeschooling, doctors who say they don't have the masks they need to do their jobs, your message to them.
My message to the American people is that there is a very low incidence of death. You understand that. And we're going to come through this stronger than ever before. If you get it, if you happen to get it, it is highly unlikely. It's looking like it's getting to a number that's much smaller than people originally thought in terms of the ultimate problem, which would be death. My message to the American people is, number one, you've done an incredible job. Incredible what you've gone through. It's been incredible. It wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault. It wasn't the fault of 140 other countries where this has happened. And there is tremendous hope. And I think we're going to come out stronger, better, bigger in every way. I think we're going to be a better country than we were before. And we learned a lot. We learned on reliance, who to rely on, who not to rely on. But our country has been incredible, the way they pulled together, including the fact that I just spoke to Senator Schumer. We had a wonderful conversation. We both want to get to a good solution. But it's been really, for me, watching and seeing people that weren't speaking, getting along well, because we all have one common aim, and that's to get rid of this invisible enemy, get rid of it fast, and then go back to the kind of economy that we had, and maybe even better. Yeah, please, in the back. No, in the back, please.
Mr. President, I have two questions, if you'll indulge me. The first question is, many small businesses are concerned that they have weeks, not months, and are worried about how long it'll take.
We're going to be helping them a lot. We're going to be focused, a big focus, and including my conversation with both Mitch and with Chuck, a big focus of that conversation with small businesses, because they are really the engine behind our country, more so than the big ones. They are the engine behind our country.
Second, if I may, sir, are you concerned about members of Congress that may have used information they learned on updates to sell stocks and profit off of this?
I'm not aware of it. I saw some names. I know all of them. I know everyone mentioned Dianne Feinstein, I guess, and a couple of others. I don't know too much about what it's about, but I find them to all be very honorable people. That's all I know. And they said they did nothing wrong. I find them, the whole group, very honorable people. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, so the whole group would include Richard Burr, the head of the Intelligence Committee, and it also would include Senator Kelly Loeffler. And so the question is whether or not they should be investigated for that behavior.
Well, it also includes Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat. You didn't mention her name. Why didn't you mention her name? And I think she's a very honorable person, by the way. So I'm not saying, but you know, it's interesting that you mentioned two people, but you don't mention one that happens to be a Democrat.
Any senator, should they be
I don't know, because I'd
investigated
have
for
to
this
look at it. possibly, but I find them to be honorable people. Yeah.
You said the other day you see yourself as a wartime president right now, leading the country through this pandemic that we're experiencing. Do you really think, going off on Peter, going off on a network is appropriate when the country is going through something like this?
I do, because I think Peter is, I've dealt with Peter for a long time. And I think Peter is not a good journalist when it comes to fairness.
But he's asking for your message to the country.
Oh, I think
You
it's a
went
good
off on
message,
Peter.
because I think that the country has to understand that there is indeed, whether we like it or not, and some of the people in this room won't like it, there's a lot of really great news and great journalism, and there's a lot of fake news out there. And I hear it all, and I see it all, and I understand it all because I'm in the midst of it. So when somebody writes a story or does a story on television, and I know it's false, I know it's fake, and when they say they have 15 sources have said, and I know there's no sources, they're just making it up. I know that, and I call Peter out, but I call other people out too. And this is a time to come together, but coming together is much harder when we have dishonest journalists. It's a very important profession that you're in. It's a profession that I think is incredible. I cherish it. But when people are dishonest, they truly do hurt our country. Yeah, in the back. Please, go ahead.
Mr. President, China has been in communication with the United States and also WHO about coronavirus
Right,
in
that's true.
January.
That's
and
true.
the U.S. shut its border to travelers from China on February the 2nd. Also, Wuhan has been in lockdown since January the 24th. And this all happened almost 2 months ago. Why did you still say if you could have known it earlier? And also, you have been calling coronavirus.
Well, I have to say this. We have, and I can speak for myself, but I have a very good relationship with China and with President Xi. I have great respect for President Xi. I consider him to be a friend of mine. It's unfortunate that this got out of control. It came from China. It got out of control. Some people are upset. I know President Xi. He loves China. He respects the United States. And I have to say, I respect China greatly, and I respect President Xi. Okay?
Calling coronavirus.
Can I ask more about stock buybacks? Many of the airlines and Boeing did stock buybacks. Is this a deal breaker for you in this?
No, but I never liked stock buybacks from their standpoint. When we did a big tax cut, and when they took the money and did buybacks, that's not building a hangar, that's not buying aircraft, that's not doing the kind of things that I want them to do. And we're now talking about buybacks. We didn't think we would have had to restrict it because we thought they would have known better. But they didn't know better. In some cases, not in all cases, obviously. Some people did an incredible job. They built plants all over the country. I mean, you'd see what's happened. I mean, we were doing, until this invisible enemy appeared, we never had an economy like this. But there were some companies that used that money to buy back stock, driving up the price of the stock artificially in many cases. I don't like that. I don't like it. And as far as whether or not we'll have that, allow them, when we give them money, because we have to keep these great companies in business because of the workers. Frankly, for the most part, because of the workers. The workers are my number one concern. But the way we take care of the workers is we have to keep the companies going. I am fine with restricting buybacks. In fact, I would demand that there be no stock buybacks. I don't want them taking hundreds of millions of dollars and buying back their stock, because that does nothing. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. One for Dr. Fauci, and then hopefully one for you.
Sure. And one thing, Secretary of State Pompeo is extremely busy, so if you have any question for him right now, could you do that? Because you know what I'd like to do? I'd like him to go back to the State Department, or as they call it, the Deep State Department, if you don't mind. I'd like to have him go back and do his job. So does anybody have any question? Please.
Mr. Secretary, can I ask you?
Do you want to call somebody?
Yeah, how about you? Only for the Secretary.
The exemptions on work travel, can you define that? Is all work, anyone with a work visa can still cross the border? Can you define what, like the measures that you're taking?
It's a great question. We're working, we're very real concerned about H-2A visas, in particular agricultural workers need to get across. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can to keep that part of our economic lifeblood working between our two countries. DHS and the State Department will work together. We want to make sure and keep commerce between Canada, the United States, and Mexico alive functional, and prepared for the day that this economy bounces back like we expected it will.
Mr. Secretary, the Mexican government has not announced any travel ban on Europe. Where have you been in touch with them as to when they're going to do this and what it is that they're telling you? And then a second question, they also are telling us and said in a press conference this morning that they will not take back any non-Mexican citizen. Any other third parties will have to, we don't know what will happen to them. So can you address what will happen to those third country immigrants that you are saying that will not be allowed to enter the U.S. and Mexico is saying that they will not be allowed to stay in Mexico either or sent back from the U.S.?
If I may, I'll take the first one, and then Chad, I'll give you the second one. With respect to travel into Mexico from outside, I spoke with Foreign Minister Ebrard a couple of times about this. I'm very confident we're going to get to a really good place that protects the Mexican people and the American people from those who might be traveling into places where we've got designations, the Schengen zone from China, so that they're not coming into Mexico and then coming into the United States. I'm very confident we'll do that, and we'll make that announcement shortly together.
And again, as we implement the CDC's order, again, we're going to take a number of individuals that cross the border illegally and repatriate them or remove them quickly back to Mexico, back to the Northern Triangle, and back to any other country. So we're going to do that in a rapid fashion. We'll continue to work with Mexico to make sure that Mexican nationals go back as well as other populations.
But are you sending Guatemalans back to Guatemala or Cubans back to Cuba? What would you do with those third countries that are not Mexicans?
So we're doing all of the above. We're going to be sending, again, individuals back to Mexico, individuals back to the Northern Triangle countries, Cuba, Haiti, all of the, again, 122 different nations that we see, nationalities that come across that border. We'll be sending them back individually to their countries, but also working with Mexico to send additional populations back there as well.
And just to put it, when you said before, you said the non-Mexicans going to Mexico. We're not sending them to Mexico. We're sending them back to their own countries, not to Mexico. Why would Mexico take people that aren't from Mexico? We're sending them back, in the case of Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, a lot of other countries, they go back to the country from where they came. Okay, and Mike, please.
Secretary Pompeo, on the issue of disinformation, is there any particular locus for this disinformation, or is it diffused?
It's pretty diffused, unfortunately, but we've certainly seen it come from places like China and Russia and Iran, where there are coordinated efforts to disparage what America is doing in an activity to do all the things that President Trump has set in motion here.
Other than what you're doing this morning, what are you doing to fight back?
Lots of things, lots of work. One of the things we want to make sure is the American people go to trusted sources for that information. But we've made clear, we've spoken to these countries directly that that they need to knock it off, that we don't approve of it. And then there are a handful of other things we're engaged in to make sure that the right information is out there and accurate information is given. This idea of transparency and accurate information is very important. It's how we protect American people from something like this ever happening again.
Mr. Secretary, the Peace Corps volunteers.
You want the American people to be coming to trusted sources of information. Does it undermine you at all when the president stands up here and he attacks news outlets calling us untrustworthy?
Somebody else have a question?
The Peace Corps volunteers have the Peace Corps volunteers.
Secretary.
Please.
In terms of Americans who find themselves stranded in places where there are no longer flights to get back to the United States, what efforts are being made to help them?
I appreciate that question. So we're doing lots of things. We've had a couple places in particular, Peru and Morocco. I think we've had the first 2, maybe 3 now flights out of Morocco. We're going to work to get people back. We're urging individuals when they can get back on their own. They traveled there on their own. When they can get back there on their own, they ought to try to do that. But we have a team stood up at the State Department, the Repatriation Task Force, that is working each of these instances. So we've heard from individuals, members of Congress. We're trying to get Americans back from these places where air travel has been disrupted. And we'll get that done over time. We'll get it done successfully.
Do you have any sense of how big that problem is?
How long
is there any sense of just how big that problem is? How many people?
We don't know the full scale of it yet, but we think we have the largest number identified, and we're working. If there are those who are watching that are someplace, and you can go on the State Department website. You can log into, I think it's step.gov. You can go to STEP and log in, and we'll track it, and we'll try to get everybody back just as best we can.
Secretary, how long are these border restrictions likely to last along the south and north borders?
Well, they'll last as long as we need to do it to protect the American people from the virus. I couldn't tell you how long it's going to last.
Have you determined whether Iran is responsible for that rocket attack last week?
So
maybe we shouldn't say that.
So let me just get back to you on the answer to that. And what we can say with certainty is this: we've made clear all along that the Iraqi Shia militias are funded, trained, equipped by the Iranians. And we've urged the Iranians not to do that, and we've told the Iranians that they will be held responsible for those attacks when they threaten American lives.
Peace Corps volunteers, the Peace Corps volunteers that are in 60-plus countries, have they all been returned?
You know, I don't know if they're all back or not yet. I know that they were directed to come back. I know that most of them are back. I couldn't tell you if we have all of them back yet.
And then Secretary Esper's not here, but to get tests to the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, are you able to give us a progress report on the status of that, if they're all able to get tests?
I don't know the answer to that. I know we have State Department officials, too, who are concerned, want to make sure we get them tests, our team as well, and we're working on that. We've had significant success on that to date. There are a few places we've not been able to get them, but we will. We'll get them there.
Secretary Pompeo, how exactly are you going to get those Americans back, and do you have any plans to get the military involved in that?
We're going to use all the tools we can. These first efforts are combined commercial, private flights that will fly in, bring them back to a destination here in the United States. So we'll do that. There are some that will travel back other ways as well. And we've worked with the Department of Defense to say where there is space available, we'll be able to bring them back on those flights as well. It's a whole government effort to make sure we get them back. They're gonna help us every place they can. Secretary Nesbitt, I've talked about it a couple times.
Thank you, Secretary. Question on Iran again. Is there any consideration to relaxing sanctions on Iran during the coronavirus crisis, since they've been particularly hard hit?
That's an important question. The whole world should know that humanitarian assistance into Iran is wide open. It's not sanctioned. We've offered to provide assistance to the Iranians as well. I talked with Dr. Tedros from the World Health Organization about this. We're doing everything we can to facilitate both the humanitarian assistance moving in and to make sure that financial transactions connected to that can take place as well. There is no sanction on medicines going to Iran. There's no sanctions on humanitarian assistance going into that country. They've got a terrible problem there, and we want that humanitarian medical healthcare assistance to get to the people of Iran.
But the sanctions themselves, no movement.
We are working to do all the things we've had in place for the first 3 years here to deliver security for the American people.
They know the answer. Iran, they know the answer. Iran, the leaders, they know the answer to your question.
Was it appropriate for the president to call your department the Deep State Department at a time when thousands of diplomats are working very hard around the world to combat this pandemic?
I've worked with the president for 3 years now. I know how much he values the people that work on my team. I know when I was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency how much he valued the work we did. I know that he watches our team, Dr. Birx, all the team that's working to push back against this virus to keep America safe. I know how much he values them.
What a good answer. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, can I
Sure.
ask a question? Mr. President,
Very true, too. Go ahead.
Mr. President,
No, behind you.
I apologize.
Please, go ahead.
The news, I have two questions. The first is to Secretary Pompeo. The news hours learned that the CDC picked up that there was some sort of virus happening in Wuhan, the coronavirus happening in Wuhan as early as December. When did the CDC start letting other agencies know that there was something in China happening, that this coronavirus was happening? And then when did the whole government approach start to happen?
So I'll let the CDC or Dr. Fauci, want to talk to that? Dr. Secretary Azar, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were alerted by some discussions that Dr. Redfield, the director of the CDC, had with Chinese colleagues on January 3rd. It's since been known that there may have been cases in December, not that we were alerted in December.
Then, Mr. President, the other question I have for you.
Excuse me, we'll do it in a second. Let Mike,
May I just have one more thing? There's been some discussion about China and what they knew and when they knew it. And I've been very critical. We need to know immediately. The world is entitled to know. The Chinese government was the first to know of this risk to the world. And that puts a special obligation to make sure that the data gets to our scientists, our professionals. This is not about retribution. This matters going forward. We're in a live exercise here to get this right. We need to make sure that even today, the data sets that are available to every country, including data sets that are available to the Chinese Communist Party, are made available to the whole world. It's an imperative to keep people safe. We talk about the absence of data sets, not being able to make judgments about what to do. This is absolutely critical. This transparency, this real-time information sharing isn't about political games or retribution. It's about keeping people safe. And so when you see a delay in information flowing from the Chinese Communist Party to the technical people who we wanted to get into China immediately to assist in this, every moment of delay connected to being able to identify this the risk vectors, creates risk to the people all around the world. And so this is why It's not about blaming someone for this. This is about moving forward to make sure that we continue to have the information we need to do our jobs.
Mr. Secretary, what message do you think it sends to other countries when you have the President of the United States lashing out at reporters?
I've had my frustration with reporters too. All I ask when I talk to the media is that you listen to what we say and report it accurately, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating when you see that doesn't happen. It's enormously frustrating. We have a responsibility to tell the American people the truth, and those who are reporting on what it is we're doing and saying have an equal responsibility to report accurately.
What message does it send to countries when you're lashing out at reporters?
Actually being reported, that the news media.
I've seen many things at the State Department be reported wildly and accurately on multiple occasions, and I have spoken to those reporters about it each and every time, and I will continue to do so.
Mr. President, Senator Johnson has suggested.
Well, I'd rather have, if you could finish up with the Secretary of
I
State.
think I've worn them out, Mr. President.
Well, let me
Is
ask
everybody
you both.
finished, Secretary of State?
Let me ask you both, if that's all right. Mr. Secretary, Senator Johnson has suggested that you and the administration may be overreacting. He said, we don't shut down our economy because tens of thousands of people die on the highways. We don't shut down our economies because tens of thousands of people die from the common flu. At worst, 3.4% of Americans will die from this virus, he said. What do you say to people that have that view? That's 11 million people he's talking about.
Well, I can just say the entire world is agreeing with us because they all have their choice, and everybody's doing the exact same thing. We want to shut it out, and we can do that, and we'll see what happens in 2 weeks and 3 weeks. But if we can save thousands of lives, and even millions of lives potentially, you don't know where it goes, but you could be talking about millions of lives. So if you look at the world, I mean, you have some very smart people in the world, you have some smart leaders in the world, and everybody's doing it the way we're doing it. I think we're doing a better job than hopefully most, if not all. We're doing a very effective job, but we'll know better in 14 or 15 days. But, you know, you're talking about hundreds of thousands, and maybe more than that, numbers of people. And, you know, we can bring our finances back very quickly. We can't bring the people back.
Mr. President, to follow up on that, there are millions of people out there that share that view, that say, I don't really need to shut things down. I don't really need to stay away from the stores. I can go to the beach. And those people making multiple actions exponentially, it's the difference between life and death.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think I'd like to have Anthony answer that, because to be honest, that's what he does. And we had a lot of very talented people telling us what they think we should do.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I think that's a false equivalency to compare traffic accidents with. I mean, that's totally way out. That's really a false equivalency. When you have something that is new and it's emerging, and you really can't predict totally the impact it's going to have, and you take a look at what's going on in China, and you see what's going on right now in Italy, and what's happening in New York City, I don't think with any moral conscience you could say, why don't we just let it rip and happen and let X% of the people die? I don't understand that reasoning at all.
Okay, so Secretary of State will be leaving. Any other questions? Go ahead in the back, please. In the back for Mike.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Excuse me, I didn't call on you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two things. In New York, where cases are doubling every day, they fear that supplies are going to run out in a matter of weeks. Yesterday, Mayor Bill de Blasio called on you to mobilize the military to deliver urgent supplies. Yesterday, he said, quote, "The fate of New York City rests in the hands of one man. He is a New Yorker, and right now he is betraying the city he comes from." I've personally spoken to emergency department nurses who say that they've been told not to wear N95 masks because supplies are so low. So how do you respond to those remarks by Mayor de Blasio?
Well, I just think this.
I'm not
dealing.
supplies arrive?
I'm not dealing with him. I'm dealing with the governor, and the governor agrees with me, and I agree with him. So far, we've been very much in sync. I guess they're not agreeing with each other necessarily, but the relationship with New York, I love New York. I grew up in New York, as you probably have heard, and the relationship's been very good. And I think government and the governor have been getting along incredibly well with the federal government. Okay.
please.
Question for Secretary Wolf, if I could. Just on illegal entries of people who are OTM, how will the turnback process work? Will they be taken to a common area and then put on a plane and sent back to northern triangle countries or others? I mean, how would that process work?
Again, it's a public health crisis. So what we're trying to do is limit the amount of contact that we have with these individuals, not putting them in Border Patrol facilities, ICE detention facilities, and the like. So it's going to be very rapid. We're going to obviously take them into custody and then send them back to a port of entry or other means. So it'll be very quickly. It won't be the 6 or 7 or 10 days that we currently have. It'll be much more rapid.
But if they are OTM, will they be taken to an airfield
That's
nearby?
correct.
Or?
That's correct.
And sent back over?
Absolutely.
Anybody?
Mr. President, can we ask
Mr. President, the checks to Americans.
The checks to Americans. The bill as proposed creates sort of tiers of checks for income. Do you believe philosophically that makes sense?
Well, I believe in a lot of things. I want to get workers' money, and whichever way, the best way to get it. And I want to keep the businesses open too, because without the businesses, they're not going to be getting money for very long. But we're going to be talking.
As it's written, is there enough, or do you want to see it
If there's
juiced
not, we'll
up?
do something later. I'm sure. I'm sure.
Mr. President, the Wall Street analysts are predicting that unemployment numbers could skyrocket next week. By some analysts, say as many as 3 million people applying for unemployment, which would be a historic number in a 1 week spread. So is $1,000 check going to cut it? Is that going to be
We're
enough?
not talking about $1,000 check. We're talking about much more than that. We're also talking about doing phases. If this doesn't work, we're going to keep doing until we get it going. And frankly, once we get the economy back, and once this enemy is defeated, the invisible enemy, as I call it, once it's defeated, we get the economy back, it's going to all come back to us very quickly. It comes back very quickly. We have a tremendous economy. We do numbers like no other country has ever done before. #1 in the world, if you go back 2 weeks, and still, obviously, but if you go back 2 weeks, #1 in the world by far. That money comes back to us very rapidly. We want to keep it, we want to have it so that when we, not if, but when we win the war with the invisible enemy, when we win it, these companies can immediately start, not that they have to start rebuilding, which takes a long time. Steve?
Confident that those are jobs that'll come back if someone applies for unemployment next week?
What projections for job losses in March and April are you hearing?
Well, we're looking at different numbers. We have a best case and a not best case, but the big thing is to defeat the virus. Once that virus is defeated, Steve, I think everything else falls in place very rapidly. I think you're going to have a tremendous upswing. A lot of people agree with me. If you look at your stock market geniuses, and some of whom are not geniuses, but they think they are, a lot of people think that I'm right about that, that once we defeat the virus, I think you're going to have a very steep, like a rocket ship, it's going to go up, and everything will be back. And I really believe we're going to be stronger than ever before. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, on the issue of supplies, you've told governors to try to find whatever supplies they can on their own.
Absolutely.
But some of them are now saying when they go to try to buy them, they're being outbid by the federal government.
Well, you heard my news conference yesterday. That was sort of yesterday's news. No, that does happen because they want to buy supplies. We want to buy as a backup to them in case they can, and sometimes that will happen. But regardless of who gets them, when they need them, we're getting them to them. Now, we're doing the Production Act. We're doing it very much, and we have a lot of things cooking right now at a high level. Remember this. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Over 140 countries. And you have supply chains that are broken down for 2 reasons, because they can't supply that much and because people are sick and they can't be on the chain. So you have a lot of interesting things all over the world. You have supply chains that broke down because of the illness and also because of the quantity. But we're getting it ordered, we're getting it done, and if you just have to, look, some of you were at the call yesterday where I spoke with the governors, almost all of the governors, and every one of them was very impressed with what we've done. Go ahead, in the middle, please.
There are reports saying that the Labor Department has told states not to disclose their unemployment numbers. Do you agree with that decision?
I'd have to talk to him. I would have to talk to him.
Just one more clarifying question, if I could. On the DPA, I just want to be clear. Are you saying that the administration is requiring these industries to create these products, or just asking?
You know, so far we haven't had to. It's an amazing thing that happened. We're getting calls from automobile companies. We're getting calls from other companies saying they have plant capacity. They want to make ventilators. They want to make other things. We are literally being besieged in a beautiful way by companies that want to do the work. They want to do the job. They want to help us. They want to help our country. So we haven't had a problem with that at all.
President, how do you help out states and localities that are trying to bid on things like ventilators and other items that are being outbid by the
Well, when they call us, they let us know. If there's a conflict, they will call us and we will drop our bid because we want them to go first, because their point of sale. So we've had 4 or 5 instances where literally that was happening because, you know, we're both trying to get stock. And if we're going against, they will call us. The smart ones, frankly, will call us, and we will immediately, we want them to buy it because it gets to them quicker if they buy it. Okay?
Do they know that they're
We're
going to
really
do
there.
this?
They know that, and it's happening more and more where they're calling and they're saying we're bidding against each other. They want to get it, they'll get it much quicker that way. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, a question for Secretary Azar. There are labs across the country that don't have the testing supplies they need. What specific actions
Well, it's
is the
going very
administration
well.
taking?
I tell you what.
What specific actions
We inherited
are
an
being
obsolete
taken?
deal, and we made a good thing out of it. I haven't heard that question in a while, but go ahead.
Yeah,
Why don't
so,
you-
so first, we're making tremendous progress in terms of lab testing. Tens of thousands of tests are being done every single day, both through the CDC and the public health labs, as well as now through the private sector commercial labs. They're getting to scale. They have supplies. They have high throughput. We do hear anecdotally, occasionally, of, say, a public health lab or another one that has a concern about this supply or that supply. Through FEMA, we actually are standing up a laboratory task force to answer those questions. Usually, it's that the lab people do not understand that there are actually alternative supplies in the marketplace that they are perfectly free to use. We've actually had to put out some common myths and truths about that. For instance, the other day, we were getting calls from governors saying, we don't have swabs, there are no swabs, there are no swabs. Our supply people went in the open marketplace and bought 200,000 swabs in the open market, and I just sent a letter to every governor sending them swabs. So some of it's just they aren't listening or checking with us about all the freedom, all the capacities out there. It's a complex system with 330 million Americans and all of these labs. So sometimes there's a lab that doesn't understand how much flexibility they have and how much supply there is out there. And we're working through the new FEMA Integration Center to help correct that for folks.
Secretary Azar.
Be happy to.
How well that's working.
Well, as I said, more and more tests are being performed every day. And as we learn about the results that are being reported around the country of coronavirus tests, our experts continue to look at the numbers and see that some 90% of Americans that are tested do not test positive for the coronavirus. And so it can give you a sense of the magnitude of testing that's going on. We have the number of cases that we've reported today, but it's in some cases near to 10 times that have been tested. But let me also emphasize how important it was in answering these questions for governors and local officials that the President stood up FEMA and the National Response Center, where we briefed governors yesterday. Now, every governor and their state health departments have the ability to reach out to our regional FEMA administrators. And that's how, as the President said, we're sorting out those potential conflicts between very significant federal purchases and procurements and as hospitals and state governments are purchasing as well. I think the new streamlined system operating now in all 50 states and our territories of governors and states going through their regional administrator for FEMA is going to make it more possible for us to ensure that our hospitals, our healthcare providers have access to what's available on the open market and elsewhere.
Mr. Vice President, you're the head of the task force. You've seen the numbers. You've spoken to average Americans. You're a former governor. What do you say to Americans right now who are watching and who are scared?
I would say do not be afraid, be vigilant. All the experts tell us that the risk of serious illness to the average American for the coronavirus is low. But we need every American to put into practice the President's coronavirus guidelines, 15 days to slow the spread, because the coronavirus is about 3 times more contagious than the flu, according to our best estimate, and you can contract the coronavirus, have very mild symptoms, if any, not even be aware that you have it, and expose someone who is vulnerable to a very serious health outcome. That's the reason why we're encouraging people to avoid groups of more than 10, to not eat in restaurants, but to use drive-throughs, to wash their hands on a regular basis. And particularly, we're going to continue, as the President has directed us, to focus on the most vulnerable population, which are seniors with serious underlying health conditions or anyone with an underlying immunodeficiency. It's those people we need to care for, but it's going to take all of us working together to make sure they're safe.
Mr. Vice President, on the issue of ventilators, Mr. Vice President?
Because you just said that you haven't had to require companies to up their production of medical supplies. But you said last night you invoked the
But I didn't say that.
DPA.
Yeah.
I'm confused.
When we
Are you
need
requiring
something,
them,
when we
or-
need something, because of the act, when we need something, we order something. And as you know, 2 days ago, I invoked the act, which was a big step. I'm not sure that it had been done before, certainly not very much. And when we need something, we will use the act. What has happened is, before we even go out, many, many companies, great companies, companies in a totally different business are willing to do things and make things, because that's what they do. They make product. They're willing to make product for us, medical product, that we need very badly for the states, that the states can't get, they haven't been able to get. And you know, most of the states, in no way did they do anything wrong. They were stocked up. They were all equipped. Unfortunately, they've never had a thing like this. So they need help from the federal government.
This is important. You haven't actually directed any companies to start making more ventilators or masks,
I
right?
have, yes, I have.
Companies.
A lot, and they're making a lot of ventilators, and they're making a lot of masks. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Mr. President,
Yes.
partially following up on that, are there automakers right now who are retooling their production facilities to make ventilators or
I can't say they
masks?
are, but they will be very shortly, because we're working with one in particular that wants to make ventilators. They called us yesterday, and we're working on a transaction. They're going to make ventilators. They say they've done it before, which surprised me, but they can do it very easily.
Secretary Azar, this is partially for you, partially for Secretary Azar. You said yesterday that you had spoken to Carnival Corporation's chairman.
Carnival, yeah.
Yes, and he said that he could donate some
No,
ships.
not donate, that's not the
Or
word
not donate,
donate. He
okay,
didn't-
lend,
He's not
lend,
giving them, he's going to let
lend.
you use them. I
Okay.
spoke with Mickey
Lend.
Arison, who's the president, chairman, CEO, and owner. I think
And
he's
he
got
could
every
lend
time
some
to get
ships
out.
to potentially be
He said
hospitals.
he said to me that he was willing to, if we need ships for helping people, that Carnival would be absolutely willing to help us in Los Angeles, in New York, wherever they may be, in Miami, where they're very big. If we needed something, they would be willing to. So far, we haven't needed to, and we're bringing the big hospital ships up in California. We're working with the governor of California, as you know, with Gavin, and we haven't made a determination. We're also talking to folks who would like it in Seattle, so we're discussing where it can be most useful. We've spoken with Governor Cuomo, and we're bringing the big hospital ship up in 2 weeks, and we're going to have it in New York Harbor, someplace in New York Harbor.
So my question is, one, it sounds like you haven't taken them up on it yet, but
No, I have
you
taken them up.
could.
I said if we need it, I'll let you know.
Okay.
That's called taking them up.
And secondly,
Right now, we don't need
cruise
it.
ships have a lot of frequently contacted surfaces, and so this is where you come in, Secretary Azar, or potentially Dr. Fauci. Do you have concerns about the cruise ships being used as hospitals?
Well, I can tell you they're very clean, and also those surfaces, the germ, as you know, the virus, disappears over a period of time. And these ships are very clean. They've been kept very clean. They've been gone over, but the virus, as you know, if it's on a surface for a certain, they have actually charts, different kinds of surfaces, it disappears over a period of
Why not
time.
just use hotels?
I mean, what are you trying to get at? Go ahead.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Why not
It
just use hotels?
disappears, the virus disappears when it's on surface after a certain number of days, or in some cases hours, depending on the surface it's in. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. A quick follow-up. So can you name any of the companies that you've asked to start making these ventilators or face masks?
I will be, but first I want to get the approval from the company, because I don't want to be doing that.
Okay,
I assume they'd like it, but I'll let you know.
Okay, well, thank you. And this is for Dr. Fauci.
I mean, one company that has openly stated it is General Motors.
So that's one of the, did
One of
the
companies,
government
but
ask
I
General
didn't.
Motors to
I
do
didn't
that?
speak to them about announcing it, but I'll announce it. I'm sure they wouldn't be. But we have others also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And so for Dr. Fauci, there's new research out that the CDC has released that many of the people that that 13% of the people with the coronavirus got it from someone that was asymptomatic. So my question is, does that change the way the approach that should be taken? And do you think that's the case, or do you think that, or do you not agree with that research?
The recommendations that are here applies to whether you're in physical contact with someone who could be infected with symptoms versus asymptomatic. I don't really think it changes anything. Certainly, there is some degree of asymptomatic transmissibility. It's still not quite clear exactly what that is. But when people focus on that, I think they take their eye off the real ball, which is the things you do will mitigate against getting infected, no matter whether you're near someone who is asymptomatic or not. It's the same thing. Physical separation and the care that's outlined here is going to take care of both of those things.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question about testing. When will every American who needs a test get a test and be able to get a test? And why not have medical equipment being shipped right now to hospitals who need it?
You're hearing very positive things about testing, and just so you understand, we don't want every American to go out and get a test. 350 million people. We don't want that. We want people that are that have a problem, that have a problem with they're sneezing, they're sniffling, they don't feel good, they have a temperature. There are a lot of different things. You know them better than I do. So ready? We don't need that. But what we are having is we're having these private labs have come in. They've been really fantastic. And we also have a great system for the future. Because as I said, we inherited, meaning this administration, an obsolete, broken system that wasn't meant for anything like this. Now we have a system that you can see, because look, we're well into this and nobody's even talking about it except for you, which doesn't surprise me.
There are Americans, though, who say that they have symptoms and they can't get tests.
Well, okay.
What do you say to the Americans who are scared
I'm not
that they
hearing
have
it.
symptoms and can't
But
get
we don't
tests?
want everybody to go out and get a test because there's no reason for it. Yeah.
Americans who have symptoms.
We'll do
and
one
can't get
more
a
after
test.
this.
So I wanted to ask Dr. Fauci, because Kevin Hassett is one of the people who is now suggesting that the real way to get to the end of this, for life to return to normal, is for every single person living in this country to be tested. That way you could see who's contagious, and you could then have people who don't have it go back to work. Is there any possibility that this country could ever get to a point where every single person could be tested, and how long would that take?
Thank you for the question. I've heard that before. I don't connect the dots there. I don't see how testing everybody in the country is going to help you to implement this. This should be implemented universally, at least at this level for everyone. The things we spoke about a while ago, that you want to really ratchet it up, like Governor Newsom is doing in California, like Governor Cuomo is doing in New York, or how you put an end to this outbreak. Testing is important. It would be nice to know, and there are certain things you could do, but let's not conflate testing with the action that we have to take. Whether or not you test, do this. I'm not putting down testing as an important issue, but people seem to link them so much that if you don't have universal testing, you can't respond to the outbreak. You really can.
But I do think, and that's after listening to Tony and everybody else that's an expert, I do think it's important that not everybody be tested. If you feel great and if you have no symptoms whatsoever, it's just not a good thing to be doing. All right, Steve?
A question for Dr. Fauci. Yesterday you mentioned the possibility of aerosol transmission of the virus. How likely is that to happen?
The possibility of aerosol transmission always comes up when you have situations like that. It comes up with influenza. It came up with SARS, in which there was a documented, one-off episode of some aerosol transmission. Aerosol means that it can stay in the air for a period of time because it's in a droplet that's very small and doesn't go down. Is it possible that there is aerosol transmission? Yeah, it certainly is. But clearly, what we have seen in the situations where people have gotten infected from the areas that we have experienced, China, South Korea, now Europe, most of it is in a situation where people are close enough to each other that a symptomatic person will have a real droplet transmission. So I'm not ruling out the possibility that it's aerosol. But again, it's not going to substantially change doing this.
Dr. Fauci, a quick follow-up on the testing issue. Let me just ask this in a very simple way. What is the demand pressure on testing in this country, and are we meeting it?
I get the same calls that many of you get, that someone goes into a place who has a symptom and wants to get a test, and for one reason or other, multiple, logistic, technical, what have you, they can't get it. That is a reality that is happening now. Is it the same as it was a few weeks ago? Absolutely not, because as the Secretary and others have said, right now that we have the private sector involved, the availability, not only just availability, but the implementation of the availability is getting better and better and better. Having said that, I understand and empathize with the people who rightfully are saying, I'm trying to get a test and I can't.
So is that a way of saying we are not yet at a point where we are meeting the demand pressure?
Well, the answer is yes, John. We are not there yet, because otherwise people would be never calling up saying they can't get a test.
Mr. President?
Well, I just can't emphasize enough about the incredible progress that we have made on testing. All of you are reporting, and media outlets around the country are as well, that that many, many more tests are being performed every day, literally by the tens of thousands. And this has only been made possible because several weeks ago, the president brought in the commercial labs, these enormous companies, Quest and LabCorp, working with companies like Roche and Abbott Laboratories and Thermo Fisher, and said, we have this existing system of state laboratories and the CDC processing tests for certain infections. But given the magnitude of this outbreak, the president apprehended early on that it wouldn't be enough to meet the need. And I just want every American to know that literally hour by hour, in partnership with these extraordinary commercial labs, we are making more and more tests available every day. We'll detail the way that we're working with states to distribute those tests. We've obviously focused on states that have been dealing with the most serious outbreaks of coronavirus: Washington State, California, New York, and others. We've been making sure the tests are in those areas, working closely with those governors. But I think the American people should be encouraged at the progress that we are making. Tomorrow we'll take some time to detail that progress for you, but I would say to any American who might be concerned that they have symptoms, as the president said so well, we don't want every healthy American to get a test. But if people feel that they have symptoms that they identify with the coronavirus, call your doctor. Their doctor can call their state health authorities that can work very closely with our entire team through HHS and FEMA and work to identify the more and more tests that are available every day.
Just so you know, just for the probably 100th time, this administration, inherited an obsolete, broken, old system that wasn't meant for this. We discarded that system, and we now have a new system that can do millions of people as you need them. But we had to get rid of a broken old system that didn't work. It worked only on a very limited basis. And we're very proud of what we've done. It's incredible what we've done. And this system will now serve for the future, for future problems. Hopefully you don't have a problem like this, but something will come up. We have now a great system, and it's almost fully in gear, but it's able to test millions of people. But we inherited a broken, old, frankly, a terrible system. We fixed it, and we've done a great job. And we haven't been given the credit that we deserve, that I can tell you. But the one that really deserves the credit are the American people, because they are doing things that nobody thought they would do. What they're doing is incredible, and we're making a lot of progress, and we'll see you folks tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Good evening, I'm Adrienne Arsenault.
And I'm Andrew Chang. Tonight, how long can these extraordinary measures to stop the coronavirus last?
We've heard anything from weeks to months.
From travel bans to closures, is this the new reality? At issue on Ottawa's pandemic response.
She said they were declining to test me. She never gave a reason.
Why some sick people aren't getting tested for COVID-19 and those who are wait days for an answer.
If I get corona, I get corona.
They may have thought they weren't vulnerable, but young adults are ending up in hospital.
Will the games go on?
We're putting sport above health and humanity.
Athletes speak out after they're told find a way to keep training. This is The National. Canada's aggressive COVID-19 containment measures were intended to help keep the virus out, but for many, an effect has been to keep them stuck inside with their worry and stress.
And while the Prime Minister tries to reassure Canadians, he is warning that this could go on for some time, weeks, even months.
I know people are worried about what the days and weeks ahead hold, but there's no doubt these are uncertain times.
So let's take you through the numbers. More than 870 cases across Canada now, with big jumps in 4 provinces. There are 40 new cases in BC, where an 8th person has also died. Alberta has 27 new cases and its first death. In Ontario, a second death and 44 new infections. And Quebec recorded 27 new cases. Across the country, at least 12 Canadians have now died. And as those numbers increase, so do questions and concerns about testing. We're hearing more and more from sick Canadians who say they're being told they can't get a test. Vicadopia looks into why that is.
COVID-19 is surging in Spain, 11,000 cases. So when Lanny Selleck returned from there with cold symptoms last week, she called her doctor's office right away.
The doctor triaged me over the phone and said, yes, I fit the protocol for testing.
Then the retired CBC producer called this hospital to arrange for a test.
She said they were declining to test me. She never gave a reason.
With more and more people testing positive for COVID-19 in Canada, wait times for test results are getting longer, and the world supply of a chemical compound used in labs is running low. So in some places, that changes who qualifies for a test. CBC News has obtained a copy of new triaging criteria one Toronto hospital is now using. It advises against testing people who don't need urgent care or aren't pregnant. This ER doctor at another hospital in Toronto says certain healthcare and institutional workers will also get tested.
These are groups that we would certainly want to test because we worry about the risk if they do have the infection.
Reducing testing has risks. South Korea, Taiwan, and Hubei province are credited with controlling their outbreaks with aggressive testing, not by rationing it.
They've been testing continuously, including all contacts, and they've also been starting to survey the general population to get a sense of the level of community spread.
The scientist says it's time to call in research and university labs to help clear the backlog of tests in Canada.
I think we're in emergency times and we should do this safely but expedite where we can. There are molecular and cellular biology labs around this country who are itching to contribute to this effort.
For people like Lanny Selleck who have moderate symptoms and can't get a test, health officials have the same advice. Stay home. Vicadopia, CBC News, Toronto.
A sense of security may be disappearing for people who thought their age would make COVID-19 a minor concern. Ontario's second fatality linked to the virus is a man in his 50s, and a report has raised concern by revealing just how many serious U.S. cases involve people even younger. Ellen Morrow looked into the real risks.
Canadian Carmen Lee enjoying the Spanish seaside earlier this month. The next week, The 23-year-old was at a Barcelona hospital, diagnosed with COVID-19.
I had some discomfort breathing and speaking. I did have a high fever, and I was really struggling with some of the lung issues.
Lee, working as an au pair in Spain, isn't alone as a young person hit hard by the disease. A new U.S. report found that of the first 500 people hospitalized in that country with COVID-19, 38% of them were between 20 and 54 years old. Of those admitted to intensive care, 12% were between 20 and 44 years old. The numbers show the coronavirus isn't just dangerous for the elderly. Still, these spring breakers were breaking all the rules, choosing social lives over social distancing.
If I get corona, I get corona. At the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying.
I'm worried for the older people, but not for me.
Even though older adults are most at risk, the sobering statistics, this doctor says, means everyone needs to be concerned.
Not only can this affect you and take your life, it could take the life of someone that you care about.
Not only that, a surge in cases could overwhelm frontline doctors.
This could happen very fast. We could reach or exceed capacity very quickly.
What would you say to Lee has seen firsthand how sick the young can get.
I have friends here who have been in more serious situations, and they are young people. You're not invincible to this. Any person at any age can develop pneumonia, and it can be severe.
Lee is now waiting for her symptoms to fully subside and life as much as possible to begin again. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
For more on this, let's turn once more to Dr. Isaac Bogosh, an infectious disease specialist. We've been relying on you for quite some time, and we keep hearing, Doctor, that older people or people with compromised immune systems are the ones at risk of getting seriously ill. But you listen to a story like that, has that changed?
Not really. I mean, I think the data is still pretty strong that the older people are, the greater risk they have for having a more severe outcome and a more severe course of this infection. There's excellent data from Italy, from China, and now even emerging from the United States that if we look at the, sadly, the ultimate outcome, life or death, death is overwhelmingly represented in people over the age of 60. Now, of course, people over the age of 60, if they get this infection, that doesn't mean they're going to succumb to this illness. It just means that they're significantly more likely to have a more challenging course compared to younger individuals.
So should this information, though, that we're hearing out of the United States, for example, change what our public health interventions or behavior should be?
No, absolutely not. I think the same rules apply if you're 15, if you're 55, or if you're 105. We've heard about social distancing measures, and these are extremely important. So people should avoid large gatherings. They should be working from home. They should just be spreading apart to really reduce an individual's likelihood of acquiring this infection and also to reduce transmission in the community.
Okay, Dr. Bogosh, thanks again for helping us understand what's going on.
Anytime.
Now, all of these prevention efforts are certainly affecting Canadians' ability to earn a living. Some are already at the financial brink. But again, today, the Prime Minister promised help is coming.
The bottom line is this. We're giving you more help when you need it. If you're a parent, we're here for you. Just like for the single mom of two who will get nearly $1,500 by the end of May because of the increase in the Canada Child Benefit and the GST credit. If you're worried about making ends meet, we've got your back.
That assistance will not be immediate, however. The government said the extra money will not start flowing for 2 to 3 weeks. And that's the tricky part. The measures Trudeau announced earlier this week do amount to tens of billions of dollars for support for businesses, workers, and families. But Farmer Rally spoke to workers who fear it'll be too little, too late.
Hi. Welcome to Get Fit with Dave.
Personal training has been Dave Shimkovich's life for 10 years. But these days, it's hard to put one foot in front of the other, with business so dry.
They don't want people to come into the home, or they don't want to go out of the home. So it's been hard to try to maintain the income that's coming in.
The father of two has a wife, a mortgage, and 2 young kids. He's self-employed and not eligible for EI, and is now anxiously waiting for more details on the government's emergency support benefit for people like him.
Everyday necessities like food, utilities, stuff like that. So it's a little uneasy because I don't know when I'm going to be able to apply. Is there going to be a 2-week waiting period, or it's going to be a direct deposit, but how long is that going to take?
Our goal is to get money in people's hands, especially people who don't have access to employment insurance, and to do that in 2 to 3 weeks.
But even those with access to employment insurance worry it won't go far enough.
EI provides you with about 50% of your wage, but as a server, your paycheck is about 50% of your earnings. So we will be getting about a quarter of our typical earnings.
Sydney Cummings was recently laid off as a server at what is typically a bustling Toronto pub. The bulk of her earnings came from tips. Fears over the coronavirus had already been driving customers away for weeks, making it hard to save.
My household is all servers and bartenders, so there's 3 of us that live there, and so we've all been laid off. And so we've been waiting to see if we'd be reached out to or talked to from our landlord, but none of us have had any information. And so we've also been in this awkward place of like, do we ask? Do we wait?
For the uncertainty and anxiety, there may be no relief in sight. Government officials have signaled that social distancing could continue for weeks, even months longer. Farah Morali, CBC News, Toronto.
As COVID-19 spreads, workers in Nova Scotia are facing a temporary shutdown at one of the province's major employers, Irving Shipbuilding. The company is laying off 1,100 employees. That's the bulk of its workforce for 3 weeks, citing absenteeism and trouble with suppliers. Irving has been working on federal contracts to supply naval ships worth billions of dollars. And CBC News has learned thousands of cabin crew working for Air Canada are expecting big layoffs. In a letter sent to staff, the airline says flights scheduled for April are down 80% from usual as demand drops and governments tell people not to travel. Air Canada Rouge won't be flying at all. More than 5,000 employees will temporarily be out of work. In Alberta, the economic shock is for some frightening. In a matter of days, the price of oil sands crude has simply collapsed. Carolyn Dunn has the reaction from a province feeling sudden pain that could rapidly spread to the rest of Canada.
Filling up these days is like going back in time. Gas prices the lowest they've been in more than a decade.
It's crazy low right now. It's insane.
But don't expect consumers to celebrate, at least not in Alberta.
I am rather worried about how the Calgary economy is going to go from here.
I mean, everybody's suffering right now, so definitely, it's going to take a toll.
Just ask Bob Pelzer. He's cut staff hours at his gas station by 2/3, and he's paying out of his own pocket to keep the doors open.
Some of the fuel in our ground, we are losing over 6 cents a liter, so we're paying people to buy our fuel.
There's a double whammy driving global oil prices down. Saudi Arabia and Russia are in a price war that's flooding the market with cheap oil, and the coronavirus is driving demand down, shockingly fast. Rush hour reduced to a trickle as people stay home from work and social activities.
We have never experienced anything like this in the history of our energy industry. When layered on top of a massive global contraction in demand, and layered on top of 5 years of economic and social fragility, Mr. Speaker, we are facing a period of profound adversity.
Former MP turned petroleum analyst Dan McTeague says only a price bounce back followed by a stable market will stave off economic calamity, and not just in Alberta.
Otherwise, there will be long-term implications for the Canadian economy, and I think 2020 looks like it's going to be a year that will be a write-off as we continue to go into what appears to be a deeper and deeper recession.
A steep price to pay for cheap gas. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
So COVID-19 is having a major impact as each province and city steps up measures to manage the virus. Anita Bath is tracking stories from communities across Canada.
Andrew, let's start in Ontario, where MPPs returned to Parliament to pass emergency legislation to give Ontarians relief through this pandemic. That includes helping to keep grocery stores and pharmacies fully stocked.
Right now, municipal noise bylaws prevent them from accepting deliveries at certain hours. So we're going to bring temporary changes to allow them to accept deliveries 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Premier Doug Ford is reassuring that there is supply in place, so there is no need to panic buy. There is, however, concern about supplies in Ontario hospitals. A group of Toronto researchers is forecasting that the province will run out of ventilators and intensive care beds in just 37 days. They say this would still happen even if the current rate of COVID-19 is cut in half. Moving over to Quebec, the Premier is asking people to stop moving around the province, avoiding all non-essential travel from one region to another.
Right now, it's important to say that there's no possibility short-term to close a region. But we saw in other countries that it was successful to do so if you have many cases in a specific area.
And the family of the first Quebecer to die from COVID-19 is pleading for people to listen to the warnings. Mariette Tremblay was living in a senior's home northeast of Montreal. The 82-year-old got the virus from a visitor who'd come from overseas. Her family says they hope her death will help save lives. Show good citizenship, social responsibility, and stay home. We didn't have a chance to save Grandma, they say, but you have a chance to make a difference now. The family says everything must be done to prevent human tragedies like the one we are experiencing. Now, there are 127 new cases in Quebec for a total of 121. That's 27 new cases, rather, for a total of 121. All right, let's head back to Toronto.
All right, thanks, Anita. There are dire warnings tonight in the United States about its ability to treat the coronavirus, with fears and supplies about to run out. That comes as the number of reported coronavirus cases there climbs past 13,000. New York State has the most cases, more than 5,300. The jump is believed due to an increase in testing. And late tonight, an extraordinary step from the governor of California. He's putting the entire state into lockdown, ordering all 40 million residents to stay home. As Paul Hunter tells us, it's part of increased action across the country to prevent the spread.
Until today, the sight of spring break crowds ignoring social distancing, now forced into it, as authorities in Miami Beach today shut the beach altogether. In faraway New York, the hardest hit region in the country, new rules today for workplaces. Any still operating must now do so with just 25% staff at most. Medical supplies in New York City, meanwhile, may not last the month. And on the desperate need for more medical gear, the state's governor today implored Washington.
This is a war. Treat it like a war. Say to the manufacturers in this country, I need you to build these pieces of equipment quickly.
But on the many calls for more gear broadly, Donald Trump today suggested the onus should in fact be on state governments.
First of all, governors are supposed to be doing a lot of this work, and they are doing a lot of this work. The federal government's not supposed to be out there buying vast amounts of items and then shipping. You know, we're not a shipping clerk.
Trump did say millions of medical masks are now being produced, even though countless providers insist there still aren't nearly enough. The need so great, they're now being told to wear scarves or bandanas, if nothing else. Meanwhile, in Washington state, the dire need is for more hospital beds now. So they're building an ad hoc facility on a soccer field, while Trump considers an offer to use emptied cruise ships for hospital overflow.
Some ships that would be ideally suited for what we're doing, and certainly they have a lot of rooms. They're big and they have a lot of rooms.
Tonight, a sobering advisory from the U.S. State Department urging all Americans against traveling anywhere overseas. It's the highest possible warning. And to those already overseas, the message is equally blunt. Return home now. If not, the U.S. government may not be able to help. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Italy's reported death toll from this coronavirus has surpassed China's. Italy registered 427 deaths today, bringing their total to more than 3,400. China, by comparison, has reported more than 3,200 deaths. Italy does have a large elderly population. A cemetery northeast of Milan has been so overwhelmed, in fact, the military had to transport bodies to neighboring towns. Now, clearly a big focus of the pandemic response is people's physical health.
But there is a profound impact on mental health, too.
It's particularly around the anxieties around the unknown.
Anxiety, fear, isolation. Up next, the calls for help and the overwhelming response.
You have questions, we have answers. Our nightly medical panel is here.
Hi, Nan.
Plus, Chris Glover and his Nan have advice for helping isolated seniors. We're back in 2.
Social distancing may help slow down the contagion, but it also breaks down social connection. And for those who already felt isolated or trapped, the response to COVID-19 presents its own risks. Here's Joanna Remiliotis on the mental health challenge and the people rising to meet it.
It's the emptiness that can be overwhelming. For many, the pandemic is filling them with a mild sense of panic and a looming sense of dread. In the new reality of self-isolation and social distancing, even more are looking for help online. On the Big White Wall, an anonymous mental health forum, the number of anxious posts about the coronavirus are surging.
Sort of anxieties about the shutdowns as well.
Ian Toman oversees the wall guides, the mental health practitioners who monitor the site.
People are very concerned about their loved ones, etc., and that impacts on the day-to-day, and especially when there's a shutdown and people are not able to get out and about, it increases those anxieties.
We met Cassandra Somer-Flower in Ottawa last summer. It was soon after she started relying on the Big White Wall to help with her anxiety. She says it's even more of a lifeline now.
So there's just a lot of stress, but I think with the right supports, being with my family, using the Big White Wall community, and just generally trying to stay positive, I think it's going to be okay.
It's the unnerving truth. As more people are told to stay away from each other, more need each other too. On Kids Help Phone, the calls and texts from anxious young people and adults are pouring in.
We're also really worried about, with isolation, comes the potential for increased domestic violence. Everyone's in a state of worry and angst and anxiety, increased abuse, increased bullying or cyberbullying. Those kinds of behaviors come out in heightened emotionally charged times.
It is alarming, and yet what is gaining traction here too, the willingness to offer a hand. When the line called out for help, more than 800 people volunteered. And online, more resources are added daily, guides offering strategies on how to cope and how to talk about the fear of the unknown.
Oh my God, that's so cute.
Then there's this, an emerging alternative to the real thing. Teresa Smith organized a virtual wine and cheese with friends.
We agreed that while we need to stay away from each other, we still need to create social connection. Cheers!
It's a toast to the need to connect, now more than ever. Joanna Remiliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
What a great idea. Another group particularly susceptible to loneliness and isolation right now is seniors. But as Chris Glover explains, there are ways you can help while keeping a safe distance.
92% of Canada's seniors live independently at home. They're also at most risk in this pandemic. So staying away from your elderly loved ones is the best defense. But that isolation comes with consequences. Keeping seniors engaged is on all of us, now more than ever. Music is a great way to ease stress. Try making a playlist on an old device with some of the greats like Sinatra and Billie Holiday. Keeping their minds stimulated is key, but anything you drop off for a senior must be cleaned. Wipe down those books, puzzles, DVDs, and put them in a Ziploc bag. They get some new entertainment, and you keep your germs to yourself. Get the kids involved sending artwork. The senior in your life will enjoy it for days, plus it'll occupy the little ones. Added bonus. COVID-19 is catapulting many seniors, including my own Nan, into the digital age. Hi, Nan. Why can't I see you? Can you see me? Oh, there you are. What are you doing today?
I was just given a list of 12 people to call from the church to see if they're fine.
Do things together, but separately. Watch a favorite show or share some tea. Hey, Nan, what kind of tea are you having?
I am having Earl Grey tea today.
Oh, I'm having lemon and ginger.
Oh, I love lemon and ginger.
Staying active is hard, all cooped up. Even doing laps around the home helps. But avoiding stairs is important if mobility or balance is an issue. But stretching can help people feel nimble. And for those missing the greens, they can grab a putter, ball, and cup. All you need is a bit of space. Even if it's a miss, with a little creativity around the home, we'll all get through this together. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
When it comes to social distancing, how close is too close? We look at the confusion about the recommendations, but first, Rosie is here with that issue.
That's right. With the number of COVID-19 cases in Canada on the rise, the political response has also been escalating. Closing borders, billions in financial support, and calls for Canadians to stay home. How is the government managing in this unprecedented time? Chantal and Andrew will join me after the break.
We're working to slow the spread of this virus. We're taking steps to support you through tough times. There is nothing we won't do to keep you safe and to protect your health.
The Prime Minister addressed Canadians for the fourth day in a row, calling again on people to stay home and try to reassure them that the government will be there to help. But in these extraordinary times, do we need to see more extraordinary measures? How is Ottawa managing the crisis so far? It's Thursday, and I'm here with At Issue, but we are doing our part with social distancing. Chantal Hébert is still in Montreal, but not in the studio. Andrew Coyne is still in Toronto, but again, not in the studio. Thank you both. I appreciate you doing that. Obviously, things have changed pretty quickly and dramatically since we last talked, and the government has ramped up its response, both in terms of a public health response and an economic response. Andrew, maybe I'll just start with you in terms of your assessment of how the government is managing this.
Well, you could say they're late with this, and they would be in company with virtually every other government on earth. Everybody's been disarmed by how rapidly this thing has grown. I think everybody was a little bit behind the curve, maybe with some exceptions in the public health community. But short of them, it's hard to criticize, because I certainly didn't see the necessity for as much as they've now finding they're having to do, as you say, both on the public health front and on the economic front, and of course in terms of closing the border. These are extraordinary measures that they are improvising on the fly in the space of a few days. Yeah, I think you would now say they have more or less caught up with the gravity of the situation.
Chantal, I'll get you to weigh in on how you think the government is doing.
I think on a number of fronts, the government has done the best it could, and what any other government would have tried to do, to close the border by common assent with a partner who is at best unpredictable like Donald Trump has to be a plus, and it's being done in as orderly a manner as one can imagine. This is the longest border in the world, between two countries that are intertwined in so many ways. Federal, provincial, it's been a strength of this government that it has managed to build coalitions when dealing with big issues. Mm-hmm. Think of renegotiating NAFTA that crossed party lines. And by and large, the federal government and the premiers, although they usually don't agree on a lot of things, are speaking with one voice. And as far as I can tell, so are the opposition parties in the House of Commons, but also in the provinces. So there are no miracle cures to this, and there are no easy answers. But I think most Canadians would take comfort from the fact that their political class has found a way to speak more or less with one voice.
Andrew, can I get you to weigh in on the border there? I was told yesterday that it took sort of from start to finish, although they still had details and are still working on details now, about 22 hours to get the Americans on board with this idea. I mean, Chantal's right. That's fairly extraordinary when you consider who we are dealing with.
Closing the border on its own, of course, was never going to be the solution that some people thought it was. It was only ever going to be a contributor because unless you're controlling, as we now know, the rate of transmission within our borders, then simply closing to outsiders was not going to help at all. And all these measures, to some extent, depended on public opinion also moving. I don't think you could have enacted, even though it would like government to have done things much sooner, you've got to have one eye on what the public opinion would be ready to and the kind of draconian measures that we're now all subjected to, including the way we're broadcasting this show. I don't think it would have been able to get the constituency for it 2 weeks ago.
That's a good point. You have to build up sort of that ability to do that within the population. Just a last point to both of you on the Prime Minister, making it a point to come out every day. Today he didn't even have, a particular message. It was really to repeat messages to make sure people understood things, and I guess to reassure people. How do you think he's doing, Chantal?
I think it's important that he does that. It would be important that he had a clear message every day and not just cheerleading. And I think the template for showing up every day, which is easier to implement at the provincial level because you have many more things you can talk about, is being set here in Quebec by François Legault, who's been doing it very successfully. But don't forget, this template in this province comes from the ice storm and Lucien Bouchard's way of showing up every day with practical details. I think it's harder for the federal government to have a new practical message every day. So the Prime Minister is going to have to be careful, not just to have people come out and sound like he's got nothing to say.
Andrew?
This really challenges all political leaders. You certainly have to smarten up in a hurry and put traditional politics aside. People are badly frightened by this, and they're looking, as they do in time of crisis, to people in positions of leadership to reassure them, to show them the way forward. It's a shame that I think Trudeau, by the time of this crisis, was a diminished figure in Canadian politics, didn't have the kind of stature he would have had 2 or 3 years ago. But perhaps we'll see that his performance in the crisis may lead people to rally around him. Traditionally, people do tend to rally around leaders in times like this, and we'll see whether that happens here.
Okay, well, I'm just reassured that I get to see you on Thursdays. That helps me get through that things are sort of normal still. Thank you both. Before we go, be sure to subscribe to At Issue, the podcast, for extra content. This week, we're going to continue talking about really the only story out there, but in this case, the role of the opposition parties in the time of a pandemic. Look for it on any major podcast app, our website, cbcnews.ca/thenational. But for now, it's back to Adrian and Andrew in Toronto.
And when we come back, when I wash my hands, should I use warm or cold water? The doctors are on standby to take this and more of your questions after the break. Welcome back. That time of the program where we take your coronavirus questions and put them directly to a team of doctors. Tonight, we've got Dr. Isaac Bogosh, infectious disease specialist at the University Health Network in Toronto, and Dr. Taslim Nimji, an emergency physician at Humber River Hospital. Good evening to the both of you. Dr. Bogosh, question number 1. When I wash my hands, should I use warm or cold water?
You know, at a very practical level, it doesn't matter. As long as you're washing your hands with soap and water, that's all that matters. And also, you know, if there's no soap and water available, alcohol hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol is also just sufficient as well.
But does temperature matter? Because we have actually gotten questions where people have asked, okay, if I have mail or my newspaper, is there a way to disinfect that? I don't know, by sticking to the freezer or something.
You know, in all fairness, we know the virus can stick to different surfaces for different amounts of time. And a lot of it does depend on the temperature and the environment around it. It can stick to surfaces for about 2 hours to 2 days, depending on the surface and the surrounding temperature. So the key message is, you know, if you are touching some high contact surfaces, just wash your hands afterward.
Dr. Nimji, next question for you. My apartment complex has shared laundry facilities. Is that risky? And I'm thinking both on the outside of the machine and on the inside.
So as long as you're using regular laundry detergent or soap and a regular rinse cycle, you're fine in terms of the laundry portion itself. And then when it comes to being in the laundry room, which is a shared facility, practice your social distancing, keep your 2 meters distance, make sure you are washing your hands either with soap and water before and after or with the alcohol disinfectant.
We also got a question about air conditioning in apartment units and whether there's any risk of the virus being transmitted that way.
For this particular virus, we don't have any data that suggests that that would be the case. So I don't think that you would need to sort of change the way you're using your heater or your air conditioner in your living facility.
Okay, Dr. Bogosh, should I get the pneumonia vaccine since COVID-19 can cause pneumonia?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an excellent idea for people who are eligible to get this vaccine and who are recommended to get the vaccine to absolutely get the vaccine. If that's part of someone's routine vaccine schedule, 100% it's a great idea to get this vaccine, because ultimately we know that we don't have a vaccine yet for this infection. We don't have a targeted antiviral drug for this infection, and people should be in optimal health. In case they get this infection, they'll have a much better chance of fighting it off.
Dr. Nimji, next question for you. How long does it take to recover from COVID-19?
So it depends again on your state of health before you get COVID-19 and then how badly it impacts you. So if you're an otherwise sort of young, healthy person, for your average healthy adult, probably about a week, maybe, a little bit longer, but not much longer, similar to if you had the flu. And then certainly for those people that are sicker and requiring hospitalization, then that would move into weeks. And at the real sort of end of the spectrum for people that are needing ICU, and that's for the complication that we call ARDS, or acute respiratory distress syndrome, then you're talking multiple weeks.
And if and when you do recover, I mean, how soon before you can see other people?
Yeah, so there were some studies that were out there on like whether or not people were having positives or negatives, if they were re-swabbing, and these were really qualitative tests that they were using, so not ideal. Once you recover, there's no reason why we think you can get an infection again. And then once you're asymptomatic, really people are saying between 48 to 72 hours of being asymptomatic following that infection, and then you're okay to start sort of seeing other people again and not being worried about infecting them.
All right. Dr. Nimji, Dr. Bogosh, that's all the time we have for questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Now, as we mentioned, we will be asking your questions about COVID-19 every night, so send us the questions you have. You can message us directly on Instagram at CBC The National, or you can send us an email at thenational@cbc.ca.
We know the pandemic has put a lot of people on edge, and some are lashing out at strangers for public behavior they think puts others at risk. Tina Lovegreen looked for the line between valid concern and needless shaming.
On the first day of spring, the White Rock Pier is bustling. You wouldn't even know that there is a pandemic, and there is very little room to keep your distance. Especially in this lineup outside of a cannabis dispensary.
They're just standing like sheep, and they're not thinking about anybody but themselves. Everybody's got to come together in this.
Patricia Rogers has a front row seat to it all. She says she's doing her part by staying inside, but as for others,
people are not taking the whole virus seriously enough. They absolutely are not.
Some have gone online to criticize other people's behavior. One person tweets, "Chaos happening along White Rock Beach. Restaurants packed, huge lines, nobody social distancing. It's scary and heartbreaking." Another, "Curving the curve, I guess." One problem is continued confusion. Can you go outside like Vancouverites are? And what can you do there? In true West Coast fashion, many are keeping up with their fitness as gyms have shut down.
I'm certainly practicing social distancing, yeah. So you're 6 feet away, you're fine.
No touching.
Pretty good. I lean back a little bit.
We hung out yesterday and went to the park and just had blankets that were like 4 feet away from each other.
This is not optional, and I want to be very clear.
BC's provincial health officer says you can go outside, just leave 2 meters between you and others.
You can walk your pet, you can go for a bike ride, you can play with your kids. And these are the things that you want to do in a small group, as a family, together.
But if you have symptoms or returning from travel, it's a different story. You shouldn't even be going to the grocery store. But it's possible to keep your distance and still connect, says the psychologist.
We can still interact with one another virtually, digitally, right? Like we are right now.
Just don't come too close to each other in person. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Coming up, the debate over the upcoming Olympics rages on and athletes are speaking out. But first, the challenge of staying home for days on end has led to a lot of creativity.
Are you ready for a cabinet meeting, huh?
Say, for example, your long-awaited tickets to the hit musical Hamilton were refunded. Well, do like these guys. Put on your own show.
Because we got it made in the shade.
Find yourself staring out of a window for hours on end, grab a sock puppet and make it a game. But remember, always jump in moderation. Can't go out dancing? How about holding your own elaborately choreographed rave? But our absolute favorite fix has to be this solution to shuttered gyms everywhere. If you don't have a treadmill at home, try a little soap, a little water, a lot of balance, and you're off to the races. Welcome back. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics are still slated to start in July, although pressure is building to reconsider. After speaking with Japan's Prime Minister, even U.S. President Trump, who was recently all for the games going ahead, isn't so sure.
We don't know what his decision is, but we'd live with his decision. It's a tough situation. They've done an incredible job. But then he got hit with the same thing that the rest of the world got hit with unexpectedly. He has told us that he has not made a decision as to what to do.
But the International Olympic Committee appears to have no doubts. As far as it's concerned, it's all systems go for Tokyo 2020, prompting some anger from athletes, including Canadian hockey legend Hayley Wickenheiser, an IOC member and a doctor in training. She shared some of her thoughts on all this. In this new world of social distancing, certainly no handshakes, it can make you wince to watch the passing of the Olympic torch. The relay is still happening, limited, no crowds, but still traveling towards Tokyo. And to hear the IOC talk, the Olympics will go ahead July 24th.
We have still more than 4 months to go.
With the virus raging in waves globally, Olympic bosses somehow think there might be time to make it work. The VP of Japan's Olympic Committee tested positive for COVID-19 and yet still stands by the continuing. Not so of all the athletes. Canada's Hayley Wickenheiser, an IOC athletes rep, is furious.
We're putting sport above health and humanity.
In a lengthy post, she called the IOC's conviction to press on irresponsible.
The athletes of the world can't train. Many athletes, the pools are closed, the gyms are closed, the facilities are closed. But much more than that, they're worried about their families. If it's not safe, we shouldn't be there.
It's in Japan's interest to delay a decision. It needs the revenue of the Games, likely wants to hold out as long as possible before canceling. In the interim, slowly, other athletes are speaking out, but the IOC, it seems, has made it very clear. Wickenheiser's words are not appreciated.
I've already received some interesting messages from the IOC, and that's the way it works. When you fall out of line in the IOC, they don't like that.
But this, she says, is a hill to die on. Now training to be a doctor, Hayley Wickenheiser hears the worries from the worlds of medicine and sport. She's not going to stay quiet.
Well, in times of trouble, people show their true mettle, and Canadians are doing that in spades. We're going to show you how a Vancouver lumber store is helping a nearby hospital.
First, though, because of COVID-19, BC Med students aren't in class, but they're not putting their feet up. They've sent a message to frontline health workers. We're here to help.
Getting the email from the UBC medical students that they wanted to help us with childcare, with errands, with responding to things was overwhelming.
So far, over 500 student volunteers have put their names forward, and over 70 requests from physicians have come in.
We're having struggles finding childcare. Childcare providers are becoming sick. My wife works in pandemic response as well. I submitted a request for help, and I received an answer within 12 hours.
Our message to doctors right now is that we are here to support you. We want to help you in any way we can.
It's an honor to have students like you who are willing to put yourselves put yourselves out there in a time of need to help physicians out in this time.
These N95 masks are what many hospitals and frontline healthcare workers really need to to protect them against the coronavirus, but some are starting to run low. So one Vancouver store stepped up, and that's our moment.
We had a call from Windsor Plywood, and she mentioned that they had some N95 masks in their storage, and they wanted to donate them to Lionsgate Hospital.
I didn't know there was a shortage at hospital, so I asked my wife if there was a shortage, and she said, yeah. The next morning, I let my boss here at Windsor know. He said, pulled them off the shelves right away. Donated a couple hundred masks, and they were super duper excited to get them.
This lovely gentleman drove all the way over from Vancouver to deliver the 2 boxes. And then I got another call today, and they had more boxes.
Frontline people need them, so they should have them.
They were delivered with a smile and received with a big smile as well.
And so clearly, they have a supply of masks because of people who do woodworking, right? And so exposure to sawdust and all that sort of thing. But their generosity has apparently triggered a whole other wave of generosity with other companies having heard about what they've done and then wanting to do the same.
Totally. Well, this is a really tough time, right? Everybody gets that. But I promise you, every day that we see terrible things happening, we see a barrage of these wonderful moments. Yeah. And that's Canada, and we're going to keep watching all of that. That is a national for March 19th. Good night. Good night.
Chers collègues, donc bienvenue à cette conférence de presse pour faire le point sur la situation au Québec quant à la COVID-19 avec le premier ministre du Québec, M. François Legault, la ministre de la Santé et des Services sociaux, Mme Danielle Mécan, et le directeur national de la santé publique, Dr Horacio Arruda. Monsieur le premier ministre, à vous la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, bonjour tout le monde. Le bilan pour la journée d'hier, 139 cas de personnes infectées, donc 18 de plus que la journée précédente, 10 personnes hospitalisées, donc 3 personnes de plus que la journée précédente, toujours un seul décès, donc pas d'augmentation. On a actuellement 2400 personnes qui attendent un résultat de test, ça devrait arriver rapidement. On a jusqu'à présent 7700 résultats négatifs qui ont été obtenus. Et le nombre de tests augmente de façon très importante. Actuellement, on a une capacité plus grande que ce qui est demandé à notre réseau. Aujourd'hui, ce que je veux vous dire aussi, c'est qu'on ajoute des numéros de téléphone. Donc, le numéro général reste le 1-877-644-4545. Mais maintenant, ça va être possible en composant le code régional de votre région, par exemple à Québec, 418-644-4545, à Montréal, 514-644-4545, etc., là, pour les autres régions. Je veux vous dire que pour l'instant, quand on regarde le réseau de la santé, la situation est toujours sous contrôle. On a libéré 4000 lits qui sont disponibles, donc en reportant des chirurgies électives. Je veux vous dire aussi qu'on a assez d'équipements à court terme, mais on travaille quand même sur des scénarios plus pessimistes pour être prêt au cas où. On parle déjà, on a commencé à parler avec des entreprises, si c'est nécessaire, pour construire des respirateurs, pour fabriquer des masques, pour fabriquer tous les équipements qui pourraient être essentiels s'il y avait une situation qui devenait beaucoup plus critique. La direction de la santé publique m'assure que toutes les mesures qu'on met en place, ça donne des résultats, ça aide.
Setting up have given results and are giving results and are helping in delay and postponing the contagion of a lot of people. I'm very happy to see that more and more people are now aware of what the guidelines are. Still, as of 6 p.m. tonight, we've asked Dominique Michel and Bernard Durham to record messages that are going to be transmitted over the phone to people 70 years and over in order to repeat what those guidelines are. It's also a way of being able to reassure the population as much as possible. Of course, the most important guideline is, if you are ill, if you have any symptoms, please stay at home. Isolate yourself and make sure that you see no one else. We really have to make sure that we keep doing this because we have some difficult weeks coming up. People have to continue following the guidelines. Today, I want to tell you about construction sites. Right now, you've seen it in the economy, there's a lot of jobs that are being lost. The private sector in particular is facing great difficulties and has been forced to lay off some employees. We are trying, as we mentioned yesterday, to set up measures in order to help as many businesses as possible. The government, however, will be announcing in the next few days infrastructure projects that are going to be done ahead of time. I don't need to tell you that in education, in roads, public transportation, health, there are a lot of infrastructure projects which had to be done anyway. So what we want to do is do them earlier to be able to replace the construction projects that have been cancelled in the private sector by these projects that are in the public sector. And it is important to say it. 270,000 jobs in Quebec are in the construction sector. And if there's an economic sector that can continue working and functioning despite the crisis, because we will be asking people to be able to realize these projects, and that means 270,000 people. Well, in order to do so, we have to make sure that all conditions and all precautions are being taken by a business. So today, what I wish to do is to address myself to all employers, all construction company owners. It is very important, if we wish to protect this economic basis in the construction sector, to be able to offer employees all the precautions that are necessary. What this means concretely is that workers in the construction sector have to have access to a place with water and soap so that they can wash their hands regularly. And I'm thinking about construction sites, for example, that are outside. So there have to be more trailers so that when the time comes to have a meal, that people are able to respect guidelines concerning keeping a distance between one another. So those things are really important to do. Together with Jean Boulet, we are repeating it. And of course, if a worker in the construction sector falls ill, they stay home, period. So it is important to be able to protect our construction workers. We're going to need them. This is a critical part of the Quebec economy that is going to be able to continue functioning if we do take the correct measures. So we have to protect those people. I also wish to say a word on the media. First, I wish to thank you, of course. The information, the guidelines that you've been transmitting is important, and also the false rumors that you put a stop to. I know that the media right now are going through a difficult time financially. Of course, advertising revenue is not so good, and taking into account that a lot of businesses are closing, it's perhaps not time to make advertisements concerning cars that are being sold. And we are looking at what can be done financially, because this is a sector that is also critical for the next few weeks and the next months, and we have to continue. We need you in order to be able to inform the population. This is an essential service, and I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity because you are also working in difficult conditions, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you. Perhaps a word on L'Auto-Québec. There was a question yesterday. We, of course, don't want people to go to the corner store only to buy a lottery ticket. So we have asked L'Auto-Québec to review the rules. This will be done probably quickly. So, of course, they'll be able to, sell online, but we don't want people to go out and take risks only to go buy a lottery ticket. So, I would like to end by repeating that every gesture that we take to limit physical contacts does limit contagion and will save lives. So I wish to once again thank everyone, and I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank Dodo and Bernard de Rome, who have accepted very quickly to be able to help us out to communicate with the population. This is important. We have to respect guidelines, and if we do so, altogether we will succeed in getting through this. I thank you. And English.
In English for our fellow Anglo-Quebecers, the situation remains under control. The public health authorities tell us that our efforts are working. Every action we take to limit physical contact will save lives. If you feel sick, stay home. Our health system is ready, and we're working on getting more equipment if it's necessary. So we must continue our effort, and we'll get through that together. Thank you.
Merci. Alors, pour la période des questions, d'abord en français, avec une question.
Our question period, starting. So you've had guidelines for Quebecers, and you have them every day. You decided to close down Parliament until the 21st of April. Parents and teachers of Quebec would like to know whether the scenario of going back to class on the 30th of March is still on the table. We are looking at different options. There's like two sectors. There's primary and secondary, and then there's CEGEPs and universities. I think that CEGEPs and universities, we are going to succeed in having remote classes to be able to complete the school year. As far as schools are concerned, primary and secondary school, we are studying different scenarios. It is rather unlikely that we'll be able to send people back to school at the end of March. We are seeing whether we can target the beginning of the month of May, but different scenarios are being examined right now. Teaching online for younger children seems to be very difficult. I'm thinking, for example, of all the children that have difficulties as well. So we're looking at different scenarios right now, and in the course of the next few days, we should be able to give clear indications. Mr. Premier, you mentioned that you had the ability to have diagnosis tests that was superior to the demand right now, but it seems that the problem is not necessarily getting the results as much as having an appointment to be able to get a test. Is the problem not so much the capacity of labs in analyzing the test, but rather having the staff to be able to do the necessary samples? Because it seems to be that there's important delays. Well, there's three things. There's the 811 line where you are transferred if you need a test. So that there's still work to be done, but we have added a lot of people and continue to do so. So that is the first step. And I think that yesterday we had 2,400 people that were supposed to have a test and that were able to have it, and there is a capacity of 6,000. So whether it be the sample or the analysis, there is a capacity of 6,000 per day. So there perhaps the greatest constraint is more the triage that is done at the 811. Yes, and it's improving quite a bit. We've decreased by an hour the time that people wait yesterday, and we have 50 extra nurses. We have 2,000 calls, extra calls. And today we're adding another 150 nurses, so it's going to improve by quite a bit. Yesterday we referred 3,000 people in order to be able to have samples, to have these tests. We have a capacity right now that is going to be increased even further in screening clinics and labs. We're now at 6,000 for analyses, but we have a capacity of 1,300, 500 with all the labs that we have. So as far as the sampling is concerned, yes, as well. That was your question. We will be improving volume. A delicate question, but I need an honest answer. We have information to the effect that there are 2 emergency doctors at the Granby Hospital who have been infected and have been withdrawn. Is that the case? And do you think that there might be a break in services in that region? If you allow me, for reasons of confidentiality, I don't want to go into too many details, but there are health professionals, in fact, that were affected. But we do not plan on any break of services right now because we have contingency plans in the case of those situations. But in the fact, we have no signal of any kind of breakage in the service. There are now many doctors, specialists and others, who, depending on the cancellation of elective surgeries or any kind of elective service, are going to be able to work. Each situation is being analyzed and investigated, and of course, our priority is the health of workers and patients as such, and to offer maintain the services. I'd like to take a few minutes in order to talk to you about the network and also talk to the staff. Today, I wish to thank them first and foremost. The staff, the doctors, the nurses, the clerks, the organizations in the community who work a lot together in our network. And we know that food banks, crisis centers, shelter centers, those are essential. So I wish to thank all those people who are working right now. I want to tell you that we received not only 10,000 resumes, but 17,000 resumes in the network of people who want to be involved. But what I want to tell you is that there's no breakage of service because people are there. And also we are reorganizing the network. So we're leaving aside elective activities. We've already freed up 4,000 beds. And yes, there is staff that does not have, who don't come from the same sector of activity, but who can come and help with the new activities that we are having for the COVID-19 situation. And I really want to reassure the staff that we are taking every necessary measure. We have instructions that they know and that we are repeating. It's on the website of the ministry. It's in the different teams at the health offices. Our staff are our guardian angels, as the Premier says. So we will have the necessary equipment to reinforce them. It is clear that there are trajectories that have reviewed in order to be able to have protective equipment. The instructions are clear. We are going to give them everything that they need, especially, of course, in the critical sectors, but also everywhere where it is required. So I wish to thank them today for the considerable effort that they make and tell them that we are backing them. They are the apple of our eyes. You've added a lot of sampling services, but how does that work for people who cannot go and be tested taking a car? Are they supposed to take public transit? If those people take a taxi, do they have the obligation of disclosing that they're going to have a screening test to the driver? And are you eventually thinking of establishing a system to go get those people at home in order to be able to screen them? Well, listen, what you're raising as a point is really important. I had not heard about that yet. But if there are difficulties, we, of course, will see to them because we know how important it is that we screen as many people as possible. Because we do want to decrease that curve, what we've been talking about, and we need that information. I would perhaps let Dr. Arruda answer the question of the taxi driver. But if there are people that are that need transportation, I'm certainly taking note of it, and we'll see what we can do to help them out. And we have to also understand, generally speaking, I want to maintain an important message. All the measures that were ordered and recommended, they have to be applied. I find that important because people focus a lot on the tests, on the masks, and etc. I'm telling you, if you want to protect yourself, follow the guidelines. We said that we were following the situation every day. Now we're following it hour to hour. And depending on where we'll be from an epidemiology point of view, we're going to test in a priority certain people. For example, when we were in a situation where there was no circulation here, we had to test people who had traveled and who had symptoms. If you don't have symptoms, don't go to have a screening test. And as things evolve, we will stop having certain tests because they will no longer be necessary, but we'll go to another category. Like right now, we are going to start testing patients who are hospitalized, even if they didn't travel in intensive care, to see, because maybe they caught it from somebody who, and they didn't know. We're going to start, so we're testing health professionals who are symptomatic, who have symptoms, to make sure that they are not ill and that they're not going to be transmitting that in a hospital setting. So the testing priorities are being analyzed together with our experts depending on where we're at. So there will be variations. You'll recall I had said, don't ask me what I said yesterday compared to today. It's a very dynamic phenomena that we're in, and these choices are made in function of the use to treat the patients and to know what is happening in the population. It is clear that with an increase in the number of screening tests, we are going to detect more cases. It doesn't mean that there is a very sudden increase. It means that they were there and undetected. But up until now, the situation is under control, and we are following it very, very closely. What people can do to help us the most is to respect the guidelines. As the Premier was saying, if you have symptoms, stay at home. If there's still people who are getting together, not outside but in homes because they want to have dinner parties, that is how the disease got transmitted in China. Listen to the guidelines and we will adjust the screening test depending on the different populations, and we're going to try to communicate these changes clearly. Yesterday, Mr. Arruda, you were saying that we're still in a first-generation transmission. Has that changed in the past 24 hours? Do we have in Quebec places or a place where there is second-generation transmission going on right now? We are investigating situations right now, and I want to tell you something that is very important. Yes, it is possible that in some place they may already be at a second generation. Are we in a second generation that we can stop in that area? Because it wouldn't be all of the province that would be in that. Because if you look at the curves in the world, look at the curve of a country, for example. When you look at it, it's very different from the one that we have in Quebec, which is a province, even if we are a nation. It's a province that has characteristics, and we do this analysis, people, time, place. The situation in a geographic zone might be different. For example, there might be only cases of people who traveled and no other cases, and it'll stay like that. And we'll tell you when that changes. But at this stage, whether you're at 1 or at 2 or even at 3 at regional levels, tomorrow or the day after, the measures that we have set up remain the same. And I can tell you, I think that the closure of the borders is something that is permeable. You'll be able to see certain graphs that have been made. The most important thing is not necessarily isolating a city. I'm not telling you that we're not going to get there. I'm just saying that the most important is that people remain at home. I mean, since there are still people that move around, if you're in contact with that person, you might catch the disease. If you remain as often as possible at home, you will avoid going to different places. That is what is so important. As far as the other decisions are concerned, decisions that will have been taken by the Premier after having consulted with the experts on isolation, because we're going to see local situations that will arrive and it will worry people, and it's totally legitimate. Mothers, people, but we have to do a sustained epidemiological study. We have all sorts of people who are studying the data hour to hour. You talked earlier on about the equipment, Mr. Legault, and I think we understood that the most important equipment is that ventilator. You said that you got informed with local suppliers. How many do we have? How many would we need for the peak? Should we order some from the Federal Reserve? Do you have any numbers on that key point? I think that we have to be prudent with numbers because there are masks and ventilators in many different places in the network, even in certain cities like Montreal. We have orders that have been confirmed. Some have been suspended, some are ongoing. And in certain cases, certain are being controlled by Ottawa, and they are redistributing them to the different provinces. So we are looking at all the scenarios, as I was saying earlier on. So for the short term, there are no problems. In 2 or 3 weeks, it will depend on these scenarios that we're thinking about right now. And right now, we don't want to exclude anything. We're looking at even the most pessimistic of scenarios. And for those most pessimistic of scenarios, we do not exclude to have some manufactured. We're talking with the federal government, with the Ontario government. There are businesses already who have offered us their collaboration. There are other businesses that we solicited ourselves. But the masks and ventilators, for sure, everyone in the world is going to be looking for these things. So we have to also follow what's happening in New York, what's happening in the United States, what is happening in Europe. So things are evolving very quickly. But for the time being, I want to reassure everyone, in the short term, there are no needs for equipment. I would like for you to talk to us more specifically about the Estrie region that has maybe 5% of the province, but I don't know, 20% of cases. Are there any particular measures, stronger measures that are being thought about for that region? For the Estrie region, it's the same measures to stop those situations. The Estrie is a small volume with many cases, but you have to understand where these cases come from. How were they generated? It's associated to factors that are probably, following the week off. People had certain people contacts. There's an analysis being done right now, and what I want you to keep in mind is that all the measures that will have to be taken in the health system or in the community in that region are going to be taken. Right now, it's the Estrie, and it was spring break. So we're looking at this. If anything happens elsewhere, and Quebec is not all at the same level either, and it's important to mention it. And I'm also, I'd like to repeat another thing. We're going to talking about fewer travels, but the baby boomers that are coming back, the 14-day isolating measures are really important. I don't want to have a detailed analysis here about the Estrie region, but what I want to give as a message is that the public health teams are doing what we recommend as being the highest standards. There are perhaps people who are going to tell me, why do we isolate that area? Why don't we close the inside of that area? But as a general principle, we said avoid any non-essential traveling between one region and another. But to get to a region of blocking and isolating a region entirely like this, we have to have good criteria and good analysis. There's a lot of information going around. I want us to base our decisions not on rumors, but what we have. That is why investigations are being made. Of course, the media is very active. People talk about this, but you have to look at every single case, and you have to have analyses, and that is done continuously, day and night, to be able to take the right decision at the right moment. But for the time being, if tomorrow we decide something else, we'll tell you. We'll do it. Perhaps even we'll do it before even announcing it in a press conference if it's necessary. But for the time being, it is still being analyzed in a very detailed. All the little outbreaks that can be big, according to you, because we see it big because it's Granby. If you place them in a Quebec perspective, it's still small, but we're not neglecting anything. That is why there is a director of public health in each region, together with a team, and those people give me information. And that information has to be validated. It can't come from what I saw in the media. How many people amongst those who are hospitalized are in intensive care? And Mr. Premier, you've been talking a lot about the different scenarios, pessimistic scenarios, but it's been a certain number of days already that the crisis has lasted. So we can see that there's a certain, speed that is being reached. People are asking themselves questions. What part of the population could be infected by the summer? Listen, it's really difficult because if we look at what happened in other countries, and even if we just look at the U.S. states, it fluctuates so much from one state to the next. The luck that we have is that we acted faster than others. That should allow us to have a curve that is not as pronounced. But listen, I mean, if we consult 5 experts, they're going to have 5 different numbers to give you probably. So it is very difficult to answer. But I'd like to add perhaps one thing that to what Dr. Arruda said. I don't want there to be any false rumors. There's no question, and I've asked, there's no question of closing down the Estrie region. There is no question of closing down the Montreal region. Those are all false rumors. It's important to say so. Six out of 10 people, those 10 people are in critical care. Second round of questions. I know that you have some for your colleagues as well. Are you thinking about the fact that the quarantines will be prolonged for people who are coming back from travel and who have symptoms past the 14 days? Well, that is to say, if somebody came back from traveling and is placed in a quarantine for 14 days, after 14 days, the risk linked to the travel itself is eliminated because most people develop symptoms before that. But, just to be on the safe side, we wait for 14 days. But that person should not start walking all over the place here and there and gathering and having dinner parties at home because the risk is not only outside now, it's here. So in fact, the 14 days when you come back from traveling is mandatory. It has to be respected. That is really, really major. And you should not be in contact with somebody. Let's say, you just came back from traveling? Okay, wait, I'll see you later then. And after, it'll be the same guidelines that we've given every single other Quebecer who hasn't traveled. We were talking about first, second, third generation cases. There's a lot of worries that have been expressed since the announcement of that death in the Lanaudière region at the residence where this lady resided. The same thing in Côte-Saint-Luc, where we learned that there's also is a case in a residence for the elderly. Are we in presence, either there or other places, of clusters of outbreaks? Well, there are cases. Now it's a question of image. Let's say that we have one case in one center and there's no other secondary cases. Well, we have one case. A case where there was 3 or 4 people, there's a small cluster, and I would like to talk about the curve. Of course, when we look at the Quebec curve that corresponds to 8 million people, we'll see because of the height of the quantity, we don't put it in a graph that, flattens it down like this. But if you compare the curve of Quebec to the curve of elsewhere in the world, in the rest of the world, you see big increases like this. Even if we have an increase like that, compared to the curve elsewhere, we're still in the little flat area at the beginning. That's what I want you to understand. The curve of a country and the curve of a province is the sum of curves that we have elsewhere in the province. I just want to say with that we'll see, it's going up, we have 12, but already, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we have noticed that it is not going up as high as it was, even though we've increased the screening tests. We're looking at all of that together. So we are acting ahead of time by anticipating things a lot. But right now, what we want is to flatten the curve. So we need you. We want to make sure that we have everything ready to care for people 1 or 2, 3 weeks ahead of time so that we're not stuck unprepared at the last minute. And also to plan if we have a more serious scenario to have extra equipment. But as of today, we are able to investigate and to do that. And we're keeping an eye on it from day to day. And I will tell you from 1 hour to the next. And that is why we're going to have frequent press conferences, and maybe, at some point we'll have to have even extra press conferences, but the situation is under control. And I'd like to remind you of what you have to do. Wash your hands. If you're ill, do not go outside. Practice respiratory etiquette and listen to us. That's what you can do. Don't go into panic. Do this adequately, social distancing physically, but remain connected through social networks. And there's been activities that have been set up that are going to help you get through this better. Let's talk about hope. There's medication right now that is being tested around the world. Claretra. We don't know if it's available, if it was used for SARS. Remdesivir, I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, being tested in the USA, and chloroquine, which we have right now in Quebec and which we could test much more quickly. It seems to me that the tests in France have been working very well. Why don't we accelerate trials on that medication here? If you'll allow me, our National Institute did the literature review very specifically about that. Clinicians are going to have guidelines. There are studies that are being done elsewhere, but also with Canadian researchers about different antivirals. We're not at the back, it's not like we haven't done anything. It is being reported as being very efficient, efficacious in certain situations, but it can't be given to just anybody. It's not a specific medication as such. But I want you to note that our best experts that do our medication protocols, and we're also working together in the research domain. We're not are doing work on that. You have to be careful sometimes with what is being published. We want to know what the probing value is. Chloroquine is going to be used in certain very severe cases, but it's not necessarily efficacious for certain levels of the disease, and that's what you have to look at. You have to look at the information, the billion of information that is available, the ones that are associated with credible sources. We have contacts, we have Canadian researchers elsewhere. It's very important. And the medication is probably, we hope, is going to arrive before the vaccine. We receive messages of people who are worried, whose parents live in CHSLDs and who are used to eating, and apparently they continue eating together at the cafeteria. Shouldn't we change the way things are done in certain residences for the elderly? I said CHSLD. I didn't mean that specifically. I'm talking about anywhere where the elderly live together. Okay, well, listen, I am in contact with Ms. Blais, Marguerite Blais, and we know that it's a big change. We know this. So right now, we have people right there. We know that there's a lot of people who have mobilized themselves and who understood. I mean, I've heard that in certain places the hallways are completely empty, but there might be places where the guidelines have not been understood. So we're going to make verifications, and it really is important to not get, together and eat all together in the cafeteria or the dining room. So I speak with Ms. Blais very often. And the team at the ministry is going to do all the verifications of those situations. I have been told that in certain hospitals in Montreal, amongst others, the parking lots, the hospitals are continuing to bill for parking. And perhaps the best way to avoid that people take public transportation would be to make sure that the parking lots are free. Well, it was coming at the end of June, and we were supposed to start certain parking lots because it was more feasible, because we couldn't do them all at the same time. Oh, I thought that it was for the population. Oh, for the staff, you're talking. Okay, well, we're going to have a look at. It's not something we had been talking about this for June. We'll see what we can do about that. That's all I can say today. We're going to analyze that. Yesterday, Dr. Arruda, you talked about the fact that we're ready to take war measures that has a certain level of resonance. Are there any steps being taken right now with the Canadian Army, for example, or are they ready to intervene? Has there been notice? Is there a notice that has to be given to them ahead of time? Okay, I want to clarify things. I was asked whether we could get up to that. I said, well, I cannot predict the future, so we could get there, but we're really not there yet. We really aren't there. But in situations, for example, and we're not there because we prepared a population. Imagine if we had waited that people, if we had announced a whole series of things from one day to the next and people wouldn't have understood the sense of what we were trying to do. And then there were mobs and the police officers couldn't control them anymore and people started protesting in the street. It's in those situations that we would use war measures, but that's not where we're at. We are in prevention right now. We are very much in prevention. And here it's rare. It's a treatment that is usually the best thing to do, but in this case, prevention is the best. Now, if we don't do prevention, we'll have problems with treatments because we don't have a treatment, we don't have a vaccine. So what I said was in a perspective of, yes, is it possible, but we're not there yet. We're really, really very far from that. Thank you. The SAQ employees, some of them are asking that it close down. Will it? For the time being, stores stay open. The SAQ, like the others. Hello. There are many workers, state workers, writing to us to say that they can't work from home, and in at least 2 government buildings there are employees that have been tested and were found positive. Mr. Legault, are you disappointed with the answer that was made by the ministry and departments to favor as much as possible working from home? Well, listen, I talked about it once again with Christian Dubé, and they are working on that to make sure, of course, to protect the data of Quebecers. So in 5 years, we'd be able to work from home more, certainly. So we are trying to do the most of what we can do while protecting data. And I think that the answer is very good. The response has been very good. A lot of people are working from home right now. English?
I think the English-speaking community probably appreciates the little bit of English that you've added in your statement, especially in a crisis.
Right. I'll continue to do it.
We're seeing, and Mr. Arruda was speaking about the foyers, we're seeing a development of small hotspots where the virus is emerging. We have a situation in Côte Saint-Luc in particular. There was the Cavendish Mall has been closed. There was a case of someone in a synagogue, I believe. How are you targeting, and do you have different tactics? Do your workers have different tactics to deal with particular zones like that? And is there any chance that you would have to start closing stores in those? Mr. Laforest spoke about Granby. Would there be something specific in like a zone where you see there's a growth of numbers?
The most important thing is to get a good diagnosis of the situation, not the rumors. Being able to understand what is happening. And it's true that it could be applied, but always with the same protocols, always with the same approach, could be applied differently from one region if there is those small spots which seems very big when you're in Granby, but if you're in Quebec City, you're seeing all things around together. And if you're in Canada, it's a mining spot. So, but we will analyze everything. And as I'm telling you always, this is person, time, and place issues. So when in one place we obtain the levels where we must do something else, we're going to do it. But it's not meaning that Montreal, Granby, Estria, Gaspésia, Chicoutimi is going to be on the same place, time, and so it's normal that there's going to be a different thing. But when there is the same thing everywhere, it's because it's almost at the same level everywhere.
Now, a question sent by email from Raquel Fletcher, Global News. Should pregnant women, particularly those working in the health sector, be sent